Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Roy showed no sign of backing down. Even in the face of flames surging at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius, his gaze remained unwavering, devoid of fear. After all, the flames unleashed by Vlad were nothing more than a manifestation of a curse. A detail Maram had shared during their briefing on this lunatic. While the flames' heat was impressive, they were far from insurmountable for him. Roy possessed his own flames, flames of incomparable significance. His most prized treasure. With a deliberate motion, Roy raised his left hand, channeling his magic. Slowly, he activated all of his magic circuits. Over 9,000 circuits came alive simultaneously, and the overwhelming magic force from the depths of his soul flooded his entire being. A towering pillar of magical light shot skyward, piercing through the night with blinding brilliance. The sudden surge of magic generated an immense pressure that crushed the advancing waves of flame. Black flames infused with magical energy ignited around Roy, surging and swelling with increasing ferocity. The oppressive aura spread across the entire area, pushing the limits of what even seasoned Magus could withstand. Even those far from Roy could clearly feel the staggering growth of his magical power. For ordinary people, the overwhelming magic in the air caused brief episodes of hypoxia. Whoa, what the hell is this? That's totally unfair. Where on earth did Dark Uaid find this monster? Roa, who was also present, couldn't help but recoil in shock at the sudden surge of power. This unexpected display of strength from Roy's body only heightened Roa's desire for it. That magic power. It's him. Far away in the forest, where she was entangled in combat with countless dead apostles, Oko Ozaki also sensed the overwhelming magical force. Though still locked in battle, her astonishment at the magnitude of Roy's power was palpable. Her confidence wavered. Despite being a magician herself, how could there be such a vast gap between them? Just how much of his power had he used when he fought her before? So this is his true power? How can such strength even be possible? Alice could not help but marvel at the overwhelming magical force. Yet, this was merely the beginning. What lay beyond the sheer display of magical power was far more horrifying for Vlad Archangel. Black flames surged from the depths of Roy's soul, wrapping around his body. Fueled by his immense magic, the flames seemed almost jubilant, writhing and twisting with fervent energy. The slender trails of fire coiled around his arm like a black dragon, awaiting his command with unwavering loyalty. In mere moments, Roy's magical energy reached an almost unimaginable peak. Vast and boundless like the ocean, unyielding like a mountain. The resulting gale extinguished the surrounding flames and cleared the clouds above, unveiling a night sky of pristine clarity. Under the moon's cold glow, Roy emerged from the black flames, his transformation revealed. His once black hair had turned an ashen white, now slightly curled. Ice blue eyes burned with an intensity akin to fire. His casual attire had undergone a dramatic metamorphosis. Flames enveloped his left and right sleeves, condensing into thick, fiery armor. The rest of his body was draped in a long, black cloak woven entirely from fire, its edges rippling with every flicker. The style, save for the color, bore an uncanny resemblance to the ensemble of the Count. This sight sent chills down Vlad Archangel's spine. But what truly unsettled him wasn't Roy's physical transformation. It was the profound change in his magical energy. It was no longer an overwhelming force but something far more terrifying. A precision so refined that his magical presence now flickered in a doubt of perception, as though it had become faint and ethereal. Impossible. While the magic appeared subdued, the palpable sense of danger it emanated had reached an unbearable crescendo. Vlad's instincts as a dead apostle screamed at him with unrelenting urgency, "Run! Do not fight him! Don't even think about escaping!" Before the thought could fully form in Vlad's mind, Roy's gaze fell upon him with unnerving precision. A simple wave of his hand sufficed. Magic surged forth, severing all avenues of retreat. Vlad moved swiftly, but Roy's destructive potential was far beyond expectations. Fire and water were merciless by nature, and Roy had no intention of holding back. Determined to end this battle quickly, He shifted into full power, aiming to eliminate his opponent before the city's casualties could mount further. Swift and decisive. That was the plan. He needed to end this quickly and find Shiki and Tuko. Black flames erupted before Vlov's eyes, a sudden flash that froze him in place. Black flash. Encased in black fire, Roy surged forward like a streak of lightning, closing the distance in an instant. Before Vlov could react, he felt the searing heat of Roy's presence and the crushing force of a fist heading straight for him. Bang. Impossible. Before Vlov could even process the attack, his body was sent hurtling backward with incredible force. Yet, Roy refrained from pursuing him. Vlov, resilient and cunning, had managed to ignite flames and summon towering pillars of fire upon impact, cutting off Roy's advance with a continuous barrage of burning obstacles. Chapter 145, 145 Flames and Frost. Whoosh. 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 The deafening roar of burning flame pillars filled the air, accompanied by the piercing sound of something slicing through the void. Though surrounded by erupting columns of fire, Roy's speed remained unimpeded. Cloaked in black flames intertwined with crackling lightning, he darted through the fiery inferno with remarkable agility. Like a ghostly specter, he wove effortlessly through each pillar of flame conjured by Vlov Archangel. Damn it! Vlov, having shattered several obstacles to halt his retreat, watched the figure dancing through the sea of fire with a wary glare. Though his rationality was on the verge of collapse, his battle instincts remained intact. The brief exchange had been enough to make one thing clear: Roy was no ordinary Magus. The black flames, no less powerful than his own, and the staggering speed that bordered on the impossible, coupled with that earlier crimson storm, painted a picture of a formidable adversary. So, this was the ally of the princess that Roa had mentioned. Even after meticulously executing Roa's plan to eliminate her allies, here stood this monstrous opponent, a wrench in his ambitions. To claim the princess, this obstacle must be removed. Kill him. Kill him. He must be killed. And then, the princess would follow. With a thunderous roar, Vlov summoned a massive white sword from the void, gripping it tightly in his hands. Die. With terrifying force, he swung the colossal blade at the black flames before him, his assault relentless and devastating. This was the full might of Vlov Archangel, one of the 27 dead apostle ancestors. A fierce power manifested in his cursed flames and the sword that embodied unparalleled destruction. Compared to NRVNQSR chaos, Vlov's raw strength was leagues ahead. However, unlike NRVNQSR's troublesome immortality, Vlov lacked such an advantage. This saved Roy the need for cautious probing, allowing him to escalate the battle to its climax almost immediately. Facing the incoming blade aimed squarely at his head, Roy raised his arm. Bang! In an instant, the clash rang out like the toll of metal striking metal. The colossal white sword was firmly blocked by Roy's arm, now encased in a blazing armor of black flames. Is this the best you can do? Black flames. The fire on his arm surged to life, intertwined with flashes of dark lightning, ephemeral yet deadly. Roy countered with a blindingly fast punch, closing the distance in the blink of an eye. As his fist neared Vlov's shoulder, the flames and lightning ignited in an explosive burst. What? Vlov instinctively poured more magical energy into his sword, slashing through part of the incoming flames to deflect them. Yet Roy pressed on, his flame-wreathed arm continuing its relentless assault. Vlov's gaze narrowed in confusion. What's going on? Despite slicing through the flames, their intensity neither diminished nor exploded outright. What exactly is this? His power stems from those black flames, so why does it feel so unnatural? Bang! A close-range strike landed squarely on Vlov's chest. Roy's fist, wrapped in black fire and lightning, left a searing arc of darkness in its wake. The sheer speed of Roy's attacks closed the gap between them in an instant, rendering the advantage of Vlov's massive sword null. But Vlov was no fool. Unlike in RVNQSR Chaos, who crumbled against overwhelming strength, Vlov was a seasoned warrior with sharp instincts. Utilizing his combat prowess, he dragged his sword across the ground, carving a deep gash as he pivoted. With a swift motion, he redirected the blade to block Roy's incoming strike. Boom! The moment fist met blade, an explosion of black flames mixed with electric light erupted along the surface of the sword. Locked in a clash of sheer force, Roy sneered at the frenzied creature before him. A beast driven by instinct alone. How pitiful. At such close range, their gazes locked once more. Roy saw his chance and seized it without hesitation. Compress. Condense. Collapse. Channeling his immense magical energy into the palm of his hand, Roy visualized it as a tightly packed bomb, primed for detonation. And with a single spark, he unleashed it. What is this? The clash of scorching magical energy erupted with an ear-splitting roar, sparks and lightning scattering wildly from the collision between steel-like skin and flame. Vlav Archangel's previously maniacal, excited gaze faltered for the briefest moment, revealing a flicker of primal fear as the close-range detonation of magical energy engulfed them both. Then, fists flew once more, colliding with raw, unrelenting force. Boom. The impact alone shattered the ground beneath them, forming a massive crater that tore through the street and sent both combatants plunging into the city's subterranean depths. Yet, even as they fell through the air, their battle raged on. Under the weight of external pressure and a ceaseless exchange of blows, the cursed, insatiable bloodlust buried deep within Vlav Archangel fully awakened. Cold. So cold. An endless, bone-chilling frost enveloped his world. He yearned for warmth, craved comfort, and longed to escape the torment of his accursed existence. He wanted to drink Roy's blood. He wanted to consume the princess's heart. Caught in the throes of life and death, the dead apostle ancestor, forever haunted by his unending curse, finally revealed the primal beast lurking within. If you're cold, then go to hell. It's warm enough there. With a swift motion, Roy unleashed the condensed magical energy in his palm. A crimson beam, capable of obliterating all in its path, tore through the air and collided with the flames surrounding Vlav. At point-blank range, the two energies detonated in a blinding explosion. But this was no mere magical outburst. The sheer force contained within the attack was enough to annihilate a dead apostle ancestor outright. In an instant, half of Vlav's body, caught within the crimson magical energy, was torn to shreds. The beam continued its relentless barrage, and the consequences, should it persist, were all too clear. To Vlav's horror, black flames lingered on the wounds where his body had been obliterated. These flames did not merely burn his flesh, they seared his very soul. In mere seconds, he felt a torment entirely different from the cold. A deep, existential terror born from the agony of soul-bound fire. Damn it! Faced with the prospect of utter annihilation, Vlav acted on instinct. He abandoned the remains of his body, narrowly escaping the flames that sought to consume him entirely. But the damage had been done. The soul-scorching fire, coupled with his existing curse, left his already ravaged body in even worse condition. Before Roy could close in, Vlav's state shifted dramatically. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his head with trembling hands, clawing at his hair in an anguished frenzy. Ah! Cold. So cold. This world is unbearably cold. Incoherent mutterings escaped his lips, his fractured mind barely tethered to reality. Then, a chilling, indescribable presence descended upon the vast underground cavern. The temperature plummeted. Frost crept across the ground, and even the water from burst pipes crystallized into thick layers of ice. The flames vanished entirely. Vlav, his face a mask of despair, rose unsteadily from the frozen earth, raising his sole remaining arm. His eyes, devoid of hope, were filled with suffocating desolation. With a sweeping motion, he released an overwhelming surge of magical energy. But this time, it was not the cursed fire that sought to consume the world. It was ice. An entirely different power. A glacial force capable of freezing the world itself. Die. Embraced the icy tomb of this frozen world. Crack. 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 A deafening symphony of shattering echoed through the cavern. In an instant, a brilliant white light surged forth, carrying a bone-chilling frost. The freezing winds carved through the air, guiding an avalanche of ice that surged toward Roy with devastating speed. The roaring flames that once consumed the city vanished, replaced by a sudden, unnatural snowfall in the pitch-black night sky. Where once there was charred, smoldering ground, now lay an endless expanse of pristine white. All fell silent. A chilling stillness enveloped the world. Chapter 146, 146 Archnemesis. Magnificent, simply magnificent combat. Both fighters are masters of flame. But alas, that Vlav Archangel. His true strength is far beyond just his mastery of flame curses. In a remote corner of Misaki town, Roa observed the climactic battle. He couldn't help but voice his admiration. The clash of flames and magecraft, of sheer power and will, utterly astonished him. At first, he had been surprised to hear of NRVNQSR Chaos's untimely demise. Even with his reality marble, such a swift defeat seemed improbable. But now, witnessing Roy's explosive might, Roa no longer found it surprising. A magician of the fifth magic, a grand puppeteer, and this prodigy. Together constituted a force that could obliterate NRVNQSR Chaos, even without the intervention of the princess. NRVNQSR Chaos, drunk on the immortality granted by his lair of the Beast King, had grown arrogant, forgetting the taste of fear. His reckless actions had led him to his demise. But he had overlooked a critical truth: his immortality was not absolute. It merely made him exceptionally difficult to kill. And his raw strength, though formidable, was not insurmountable. Against opponents of equal or superior caliber, he was prey to be toyed with until death claimed him. Roa had long seen through this. When he learned of Oko Aozaki's involvement in Misaki Town alongside another faction, he predicted an RVNQSR Chaos's grim fate. Still, he hadn't expected the fool to be outright killed. At most, he assumed an RVNQSR would be crippled and handed over to the church for containment. Yet, Roa felt no pity for the man's death. Only a small sense of relief. He was even grateful. An RVNQSR Chaos's folly had illuminated the hidden threats within Misaki Town. Moreover, Roa thanked his own foresight in not rushing to join the battlefield alongside Vlav Archangel as planned. His plans were progressing smoothly. The Tano household was besieged by his dead apostles. Tuko Aozaki had been ambushed and blown sky high. Oko Aozaki was entangled with a carefully prepared gift and wouldn't be free anytime soon. Now, the only threats remaining in the city were this enigmatic man and the princess herself. But this man's strength was truly beyond expectations. To battle Vlav Archangel to this extent and even force him to reverse his attribute and unleash his terrifying ice spells. Such power and composure were nothing short of remarkable. Roa was thoroughly impressed. Compared to the host body he currently inhabited, this man was leagues superior. Simply observing him filled Roa with covetous desire. So, she's coming after all. Roa's brow furrowed slightly as he sensed a familiar presence rapidly closing in. Elsewhere, beneath the night sky, golden streaks of light darted toward the high-rise where Roa stood. The growing magical aura left no doubt in Roa's mind. The princess had found him. It was only natural. The chaos at the Tano estate, followed by Vlav Archangel's fiery inferno, had left no room for subtlety. It was inevitable that the princess would notice his presence. And at this stage, was there even a point in hiding? It was time for him to step onto the stage and greet his old acquaintance. The golden light swiftly descended onto the nearby street, its radiance illuminating the darkness. Arcueid sniffed the air, her crimson eyes blazing with fury. Earlier, she had only a vague sense of it, but now she was certain. The filthy serpent she had been hunting was here. Originally, she had planned to assist Roy in defeating Vlav Archangel before pursuing Roa. But Roy had refused her help. Focus on eliminating Roa, leave this man to me. I can handle him alone. If you truly wish to help me, dispose of Roa as quickly as possible, then find Shiki and Oko. Through his butterfly familiar, he sensed that Shiki's presence had grown faint. Likely in grave danger. Which left him deeply worried. As for his own situation, he assured Arcueid, don't worry. I won't lose. Confident in Roy's strength, Arcueid trusted his judgment and followed his directive to prioritize eliminating Roa. Tracking Roa's presence, Arcueid wasted no words. The moment she locked onto his location, she charged decisively in his direction. Spotting the figure on the rooftop, her pale hands transformed into razor-sharp claws, her formidable aura gathering with intensity. In a flash, she lunged at Roa with incredible speed. Swish. This was her full-force attack. During their previous encounters, this move had ended more than half of Roa's lives. If she could land even a single blow, he would undoubtedly die. There was no need for hesitation or elaborate planning. All she had to do was repeat what she had done before, tear him apart. Ha! So impatient, aren't we? Not even a proper greeting before trying to kill me? Sensing the imminent threat, Roa had no intention of standing still and waiting to die. The memories of his past defeats had taught him to be wary of this particular move. Without hesitation, he leapt to a safer position. Boom. The sound of stone shattering echoed as the building beneath him collapsed under the sheer force of Arcueid's strike. The attack, devastating as it was, missed its mark. Ha 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 ha. It's been a while, Arcueid. What an enthusiastic welcome you've prepared for me. When was the last time we met? Silence. You are unworthy to utter my name. Hearing Roa's loathsome voice, Arcueid's anger flared, and her relentless assault showed no sign of abating. But Roa wasn't overly pressured. Drawing on his past experiences, he was far from foolish enough to face her head-on. Instead, he relied on the agility of his host body and the advantage of his weapons to evade and counter her attacks, engaging in a game of cat and mouse. A swipe, a slash, a feint. Arcueid's attacks were primal, relying on sheer instinct rather than refined technique. Befitting a creature of innate strength. Like a wild beast, her combat style was raw and unpolished. Dealing with such an opponent required understanding her attack patterns and exploiting them. Roa knew this and acted accordingly. Damn it. Frustration flashed across Arcueid's face as her attacks failed to land. In the past, she might have found amusement in such a chase, testing whether her speed could outmatch Roa's evasiveness. After all, she was in no real danger, she could afford countless errors. Roa, on the other hand, only needed to make one mistake, and it would spell his end. But this time was different. She didn't have the luxury of wasting time with Roa. Whether Roy needed her assistance or not, it was clear that Shiki and Oko were in trouble. For the sake of her few treasured friends over the past century, Arcuaid had to finish this fight as quickly as possible and move on to help the others. But how? Her crimson eyes burned with fury as she glared at Roa, who was as slippery as a Neel. Her transformed claws and the fiery determination in her gaze made her frustration evident. No matter how she attacked, Roa managed to counter with bizarre techniques, evading her strikes. After a few more exchanges, she realized brute strength alone wouldn't suffice to take him down quickly. She needed another approach. But what could she do? Wait. There was one way. Arcuaid's eyes lit up as a sudden idea crossed her mind. Chapter 147, 147 Marble Phantasm on the rooftop, staring at Roa, who was gleefully darting about, Arcuaid was starting to grow impatient. She didn't have the luxury of wasting time on him. This needed to end quickly. Suddenly, she recalled Roy's earlier advice about her combat style. A glimmer of realization flashed in her eyes. With a sweeping motion of her hands, she gathered her magical energy and materialized numerous bizarrely shaped blades around her, hurling them toward Roa in an unrelenting torrent. You're overflowing with magical energy. Focusing purely on brute force is a waste of your unique abilities. These words were Roy's critique. Try to understand your unique potential. Perceive its essence and transformation. Analyze. Reconstruct. Manifest. Go on, create something entirely new. The echoes of his guidance replayed in her mind. Roy attempted to push her toward realizing her full potential. When Roy first witnessed Arcuaid's absurdly straightforward combat style, he was practically driven mad with frustration. Even though he knew her intellect wasn't her strong suit, he hadn't expected her to squander such extraordinary talent so carelessly. After all, Arcuaid's ability, Marble Phantasm, was one of the most absurd and powerful in existence, even within the context of the moonlit world. It was no less formidable than Roy's Heaven's Feel or Zelrech's Kaleidoscope. But in her hands, this miraculous ability was almost entirely neglected, used passively at best. Marble Phantasm, as the name suggests, is a unique power inherent to her as a nature-aligned spirit. It connects her will to the world itself, allowing her to alter reality in accordance with her imagination. In simpler terms, it enables her to manifest objects she visualizes in her mind, creating something out of nothing. For comparison, Emiya Shiru's projection magic relies on replicating weapons based on their legendary origins, producing imitations. This is why Gilgamesh disdainfully refers to them as fakes. However, anything manifested through Arcuaid's Marble Phantasm would be so authentic that even Gilgamesh couldn't label it a forgery. This power is utterly broken, on par with the most revered true magic. Armed with sufficient knowledge of legendary armaments, she could conjure divine constructs tailored to counter any opponent, no matter the situation. Yet such an incredible ability was almost forgotten by this golden-haired simpleton, wasted as she recklessly relied on brute strength alone. After defeating NRVNQSR Chaos, Roy had taken it upon himself to tutor her in how to properly utilize her overpowered skill. Using Gilgamesh's combat style as a teaching template, he guided Arcuaid toward emulating the King of Heroes tactics. If a quick melee kill with her claw strike worked, that was ideal. But if faced with a persistent and troublesome foe, she should fully exploit her Marble Phantasm to summon weapons that counter her opponent's strengths. From there, she could overwhelm them with a constant barrage of weaponized destruction. The strategy revolved around targeted weapon deployment, long-range attrition, and exploiting openings to deliver a decisive blow. And so, faced with a rain of black keys and specialized anti-demon weapons made from enchanted mithril, Roa found himself utterly stunned. What in the world? After countless cycles of reincarnation and evasion, Roa had grown familiar with Arcuaid's straightforward tactics. But now, this sudden shift left him reeling. Arcuaid, you're breaking the rules. What kind of absurd battle strategy was this? As the relentless black key storm raged around him, Roa couldn't help but question his existence. In their prior confrontations, Arcuaid had stuck to her claws and fists, tearing him apart with primal savagery. So why was she suddenly raining firepower down on him like an artillery brigade? Roa had even invested heavily in close combat techniques to counter her melee attacks, only to find his preparation utterly useless. This time, Arcuaid wasn't the same berserker brute he had faced before. She had transformed into a devastating long-range mage capable of unleashing a firestorm of weapons. The stark contrast rendered all of Roa's careful planning meaningless. Even worse, she wasn't just summoning random weapons. Arcuaid dared to manifest the church's anti-demon arsenal, weapons specifically designed to annihilate dead apostles like himself. Have you forgotten your identity, you damn fool? Roa shouted in rage as he fled, weaving through the relentless assault. You're the White Princess of the true ancestors. Where is your pride? Watching the black keys rain down like divine judgment, Roa cursed under his breath. However, he also knew there was little he could do against Arcuaid's unorthodox tactics. The weapons she summoned, modeled on anti-demon tools Roy had acquired from the church, were near-perfect replicas. Thanks to the unreasonable power of marble phantasm, these weapons were functionally identical to their originals and equally effective against dead apostles. Even Arcueid felt a slight aversion to these tools. Their mere presence made her uncomfortable, but she endured the sensation for the sake of efficiency. But seeing Roa below scrambling for his life under the onslaught of her black key barrage, Arcueid couldn't help but feel elated. Despite having executed Roa countless times before, she had never seen him this panicked. Nor had she ever felt such satisfaction. It was as though she had discovered a new continent. With a flick of her hands, Arcueid expanded the scale of her marble phantasm, conjuring even more weapons and mercilessly flinging them toward Roa. Shing. 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 The endless swoosh of metal tearing through the air engulfed Roa like a torrential downpour. The clash of enchanted metal echoed as weapons collided mid-flight, producing a grating, knife-on-grindstone screech that only added to the chaos. This terrifying scene made Roa, already fleeing for his life, even more desperate. He pushed his speed to its absolute limit. The more she experimented, the more Arcueid found herself enjoying this new combat style. It was undeniably more effective than relying solely on brute force. Roy was right. The man who taught her about this technique, based on the strategies of Gilgamesh, must have been a genius. Why had she never thought of using her abilities this way before? But it was time to end this quickly. Conjuring a pair of massive wings on her back, Arcueid soared into the sky, pursuing the fleeing Roa from above. No sooner had her first volley of black keys finished than she conjured another 60 or so pristine blades, sending them hurtling downward. A storm of blades and feathers filled the air. The saturating firepower rained from above, leaving Roa no room to maneuver. Roa, who had been planning to hurl a barrage of insults while engaging in melee combat to stall for time, now found himself utterly overwhelmed. Forced to scurry like a rat, he could only avoid the weapons designed to annihilate dead apostles. If he slowed even a fraction, he'd be skewered by these church-forged anti-demon tools, leaving his body riddled with holes. Although Roa had long resigned himself to dying at the hands of the White Princess, he couldn't afford to perish so unceremoniously. The timing was far from right. Thus, his grand plan, to buy time with taunts and banter while fending her off in melee combat, was completely derailed by the unrelenting storm of black keys. His only option was to flee in disgrace, unable to fight back at all. Meanwhile, Meram, who had sensed the princess's surge of magical energy from across the city, rushed to her side. But when he arrived and witnessed the spectacle of Arcueid chasing Roa with a relentless barrage of black keys, he froze in shock. The scene before him was baffling. The black keys, with their potent anti-demon properties, were just as dangerous to him as they were to Roa. He dared not approach too closely and could only watch the bizarre game of cat and mouse unfold from a safe distance. What in the world is going on? Initially, he had worried that Arcueid might struggle against Roa. But seeing this, all his concerns evaporated. There was no doubt about it. Roa was the one at a disadvantage. The so-called battle was anything but a fair exchange of blows. It was an utterly one-sided slaughter. In truth, it was more accurate to describe it as Arcueid tormenting Roa without mercy. One had to admit, the princess's newfound combat style was astoundingly effective. Although, it did seem just a tad excessive. But Meram felt no pity for Roa. The man had long earned his punishment. No matter how brutally he was torn apart, he deserved every ounce of it. Having confirmed the situation, Meram decided it was time to act. Since Roa was here, he might as well take the opportunity to reconnect with an old colleague in the only way appropriate. With that, Meram Solomon leaped into action, sprinting toward Roa at full speed. Roa, I am here to kill you too. Chapter 148, 148. See you soon? On another part of the battlefield. Within the underground mall of Misaki Town. Interesting? Perhaps a little, but not much. Isn't that right, Vlav Archangel? Standing atop a frost-covered floor, Roy grasped Vlav Archangel's neck with his frozen arm. His icy blue eyes stared at him coldly, devoid of any emotion. As for the frost unleashed by Vlav Archangel, it had already dissipated into nothingness in mere moments, leaving behind only a faint scattering of ice crystals in the air. Compared to the overwhelming force he had unleashed earlier, these remnants seemed laughably insignificant. You! What did you just? How did you do that? Vlav Archangel, hoisted into the air by Roy's grip, was clearly at a loss. Moments ago, he had unleashed his power, flooding the surrounding area with a bone-chilling frost that should have consumed everything, including Roy. Yet, the current scene defied all comprehension. He couldn't understand it. He couldn't accept it. He didn't know what it was, but in the instant his frost erupted, he thought he saw a light. A radiant, white world flickering faintly behind Roy. What was that? High-speed divine words. Heaven him, instant activation. The moment the frost surged forward, Roy made an immediate decision and deployed his reality marble. Through the instant activation of his reality marble, Roy transferred Vlav Archangel's unleashed glacial frost and deadly cold to another self-contained world, minimizing the potential casualties caused by Vlav's devastating power. Although both Vlav and Roy had been wreaking havoc on the city with flames and dead apostle attacks, their destruction was largely confined to surface-level structures. Subterranean areas such as malls and parking garages had become makeshift sanctuaries for survivors. Roy's mystic eyes allowed him to perceive the color and state of souls. His heightened senses confirmed that at least 1,000 survivors remained in the underground sectors. If the frost had spread unchecked, it would have transformed all life below into frozen statues in an instant. However, activating a reality marble in this location would drag many survivors into its domain. The dense concentration of ether in the replicated Age of Gods environment would suffocate them within moments. While he could limit the marble's range as much as possible, at least dozens if not hundreds of people would inevitably be caught in the expansion and killed. Saving everyone was an impossible task. The most pragmatic choice would be to sacrifice a portion of the survivors to trap Vlav within the marble, thereby saving the rest. Yet the situation presented a grim trolley problem with no perfect solution. This time, it was Roy's turn to choose. Logic dictated that sacrificing the few to save the many was the best course of action. He could avenge the victims later by tearing Vlav apart. But if he resorted to such measures, how would he differ from Emiya Giritsugu in his darkest moments? Roy had never been one to weigh lives on a scale. No one had the right to measure the value of a human life. Even faced with this dire predicament, he resolved to save everyone, no matter how improbable. So, confronted with the encroaching frost and glaciers, Roy made a daring and audacious decision. He activated his reality marble with a radius of 3 meters, covering only himself and Vlav Archangel. Then, setting strict parameters in his mind, he controlled its duration to less than 1 second. Before the marble could drag others into its domain, he forcibly terminated its operation. High-speed divine words. Reinforcement magecraft, 5 senses. Mystic eyes of soul binding. Heaven hymn, radius 2 meters, duration set to 0.2 seconds. The white world of the marble unfolded at Roy's feet, piercing through the frost unleashed by Vlav Archangel with a blinding radiance. Yet, just as it was about to expand further, engulfing its surroundings, the white domain contracted rapidly before exploding into nothingness. The faint white glow glimpsed through the frost earlier by Vlav Archangel had been Roy's reality marble in action. Roy successfully neutralized Vlav Archangel's glacial assault and saved all the underground survivors. But this reckless method came at a cost. Grasping Vlav's neck, Roy attempted to channel his magical energy for a finishing blow. Yet, a sharp pain surged from deep within his mind. The conflicting actions of massive magical energy output followed by an abrupt halt caused strain in his magical circuits. His body faltered, his icy blue eyes bleeding profusely. Sensing Roy's sudden decline, Vlav Archangel, though confused, instinctively seized the opportunity. With Roy's grip weakening, he raised a trembling hand, gathering power to escape. Killed so many. And you still think you can run? Blood streaming from his eyes, Roy's voice was filled with fury. Despite the damage to his circuits and the toll on his body, he refused to let this murderer flee. Not even the faintest possibility of escape would remain for Vlav. Roy raised his fist, black flames and crackling lightning surging around it. Though his circuits were strained to the breaking point and blood poured from his eyes and nostrils, he funneled every last ounce of power into his strike. This man deserved to burn in hell. You won't get away. Sensing imminent death, Vlav Archangel screamed in desperation. Their powers collided simultaneously. Vlav's hastily gathered magical energy against Roy's relentless fist. Boom. The detonation of magical energy echoed, followed by the gruesome sound of flesh being torn asunder. Vlav Archangel's final frost dissipated as Roy's fist, wreathed in black flames, lightning, and seething rage, struck his head with overwhelming force. His skull shattered instantly. As charred flesh met blazing fire, a sickening sizzle filled the air. Vlav's lifeless body collapsed into the frost below, his headless corpse consumed by Roy's black flames, erasing any chance of resurrection. The 19th dead apostle ancestor, Vlav Archangel, was dead. His crimes were paid in full. Meanwhile, on the other side, both Arcuaid, who was in pursuit, and Roa, who was fleeing in desperation, felt the death of Vlav Archangel. Arcuaid was elated. She had always believed in Roy's ability to eliminate that lunatic, but even she hadn't anticipated it happening so quickly. The speed with which Vlav had been defeated. Barely over 10 minutes. Shocked even Miriam Solomon. Miriam was well aware of Vlav Archangel's power. Even among the dead apostle ancestors, Vlav's destructive capabilities placed him among the most formidable. For such a being to be dispatched in such a short span of time? The sheer terror of Roy's strength was undeniable. Meram now realized just how reckless his earlier attempts to test Roy had been. It was akin to dancing on the edge of a blade. Utterly suicidal. At that moment, Roa, having also sensed Vlad Archangel's demise, abruptly stopped running. Turning to face his two pursuers, he smiled. There was no sadness nor joy in his expression, neither mourning nor relief at Vlad's death. Instead, his face was marked with derision. That fool, Vlad, had been utterly manipulated by Roa's lies. Both before and now. A simple deception had turned someone who sought revenge against him into a mere tool, one Roa had used to wear down his pursuers. And even in death, Vlad had remained oblivious to the fact that the promise Roa had made to him was a complete fabrication. To Roa, such a pawn wasn't worth mourning. If anything, he was grateful. Seeing Roa halt, Arcuaid was momentarily surprised. But recalling her own countless encounters with his deceit, she decided not to give him any opportunity to speak. Activating her marble phantasm, she summoned a storm of sharp black keys around her. They streaked toward Roa like deadly missiles, while her delicate hand morphed into razor-sharp claws, ready to strike him during any attempt to evade. But thud, thud. Countless black keys pierced Roa's body effortlessly. In an instant, he was riddled with wounds, lifeless and motionless, as if his very soul had been extinguished. Arcuaid's prepared claw strike became unnecessary, leaving her and Meram uneasy. No evasion. No resistance. This man, who had been fleeing at full speed moments ago, now stood still, allowing himself to be killed. Ha 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 ha, Arcuaid, Meram, you're quick, as always. But my goal has already been achieved. This worthless body? Consider it a gift. Roa's voice echoed from his lifeless corpse. Roa. At the sound of his voice, Arcuaid lunged at the corpse, tearing it apart in a fury, reducing the already disfigured remains to shreds. It's useless, Arcuaid. This body has outlived its purpose. Destroy it all you like, it makes no difference. But this time, I've won. See you soon. See you soon? What did that mean? Meram inspected the remains closely. He was certain that the body was dead. Roa had indeed been killed. Could it be that he had already found another vessel for his reincarnation? See you soon. Could he mean? What? See you soon? What is that supposed to mean? But Meram's expression darkened with realization. If Roa's next move was what Meram feared, and if he succeeded, they were all doomed. Princess. Go back to Roy. Roa's target is him. His next vessel is Roy's body. Meram shouted, his urgency undeniable. Vlad Archangel was just bait. A trap to injure Roy and lower his guard. Roy. What? That bastard's target is Roy? Arcuaid's eyes widened in horror. The thought of Roy being in danger transformed her into a blur of motion. Like an arrow released from a bow, she launched herself toward Roy's location with unparalleled speed. On the other side, Roy exhaled deeply, finally confirming the death of Vlad Archangel. Lifting a hand, he rubbed at his still bleeding eyes, muttering softly as he activated healing magic to stabilize his injuries. Ah! RGH. The sudden sound of raspy growls echoed from the collapsed ruins beneath him. Moments later, several maddened dead apostles emerged from the debris, lunging toward him with frenzied abandon. Dead apostles again? Seeing the low-level creatures, Roy frowned but remained composed. Even in his weakened state, these small fry pose no real threat. Activating the volumen hydrargyrum, arcs of silvery light streaked across the air, effortlessly cutting down the attackers in one swift motion. But almost immediately, more dead apostles crawled out from the rubble, their grotesque forms illuminated faintly by the moonlight. Is this never going to end? As he prepared to channel his magical energy for a wide-range attack to finish them all at once, a shadow darted out from the darkness, closing the distance between them with alarming speed. Thud. In an instant, the volumen hydrargyrum shifted into a blade of silver in his grasp, piercing the would-be assailant cleanly through its chest. But as he looked at the face of the impaled dead apostle, he froze. A grin. The creature's face was twisted in a mocking smile. Nice to meet you. Hiss. A sharp pain pierced Roy's head, a blinding, unbearable ache that made him instinctively clutch his temples. Amid the cacophony of dead apostles' growls, a taunting voice echoed in his mind, drowning out all other sounds. Through sheer willpower, Roy drove the silver blade of volumen hydrargyrum to dispatch the remaining dead apostles, clearing the area of immediate threats. But his vision blurred, and the world around him began to spin. My brain. It's still recovering from the severe damage earlier. Even my mystic eyes won't activate. To think I left myself open like this. What a mess. Closing his eyes, Roy allowed his consciousness to sink deep into his mental realm, ready to confront the uninvited intruder who had infiltrated his mind. Chapter 149, 149 I'm not locked in here with you, you're locked in here with me. A situation. Roy sank his consciousness into the mental realm. So this is what your mental world looks like. How utterly bizarre. Roy's voice echoed in his ears. Strange, strange. Truly strange. Are you even human? Roy lifted his gaze to the man attempting to seize control of his body. For Roy's physical form had been an object of envy for some time. Ever since that fateful night when NRVNQSR chaos had been mercilessly crushed by Roy had set his sights on this nearly perfect vessel. Endless reserves of magical energy, an extraordinary magic circuit, unique techniques, and even a reality-bending ability like marble phantasm. To say he wasn't tempted would be an outright lie. However, the demise of NRVNQSR chaos served as a stark warning. Confronting Roy directly was a fool's errand. If Roy wanted this body, he would need a more calculated approach. Yet, Roy's strength wasn't his only concern. The formidable allies surrounding him. The magician of the fifth magic, the Grand Puppeteer, the White Princess, and even the Tano family were all significant obstacles. Thus, Roy devised a meticulous plan. He sought out Vlav Archangel, the perfect pawn, baiting him with the prospect of killing the princess. The goal was to lure her and Roy into his trap, dividing their forces and isolating Roy. Although Miriam's unexpected interference complicated things, it ultimately didn't matter. Through careful observation, Roy had uncovered Roy's fatal flaw. Compassion. In battle, Roy would always avoid harming civilians, unwilling to drag innocent lives into his conflicts. He would even grow angry or mournful over their deaths. A weakness NRVNQSR chaos had confirmed with his life. This weakness was the key. If Roy were a traditional Magus, cold and indifferent, Roy would have struggled to outmaneuver him. But with his compassion, the strategy became clear. The plan was set in motion. Step 1. Direct waves of dead apostles to attack Alice Kuonji, forcing Oko Ozaki to defend it. Step 2. Ambush Tuko Ozaki and the girl accompanying her along the way. Step 3. Ignite chaos within the city by setting fires and turning civilians into dead apostles, forcing the Tano family into a desperate defense. The aim was simple: weaken Roy and Arcuaid by eroding their support system, isolate them, and force them to face Vlav Archangel. Roy would then intervene at the opportune moment. He had promised Vlav that they would work together to eliminate the princess and Roy, with Vlav gaining the princess's heart to lift his curse, and Roy claiming Roy's body. They had even agreed to set aside their grudges temporarily. Of course, Roy had no intention of keeping that promise. Instead, he deliberately misled Vlav, ensuring the princess was drawn away and delayed elsewhere. As for Vlav's confrontation with Roy made no effort to disclose information about his reality marble. Aware that Roy might avoid using his reality marble to protect civilians, Roy banked on the resulting handicap, forcing Roy into an exhausting battle against Vlav. Roy didn't mind if things didn't go as planned. If Roy unleashed the reality marble and won, Roy could escape amid the chaos or die and prepare for the next reincarnation. Either outcome was acceptable. But fortune smiled on him this time. Roy's injuries were unprecedentedly severe, presenting Roy with the perfect opportunity to act. Abandoning the frail body of Shiki Tano, Roy used his reincarnation magecraft at the moment of death, aiming to seize Roy's body. The spell succeeded. He entered Roy's mental realm, ready to claim his prize. Yet what greeted him was not what he had expected. An endless expanse of white stretched in all directions. No memories. No visions. Nothing but a vast, empty void. A pale-faced man stood in this endless whiteness. His long, disheveled hair framed his sturdy figure as he wandered aimlessly, his hollow gaze filled with confusion. Then a voice broke the silence. "You've arrived?" Roy noticed Roy's arrival. In an instant, he flickered forward, appearing right in front of Roy. His hollow eyes locked onto Roy's, brimming with undisguised malice and venom. "What is happening here? Why don't you take a guess?" Roy gazed at Roy, whose fury boiled into impotent rage. A faint smile lingered on Roy's lips. Raising his hand, Roy attempted to manipulate his mental world, just as he had done in the dream with Merlin. The moment the thought crossed his mind, the blank expanse of his Mendel realm transformed. In the blink of an eye, it became a boundless sea of flowers. An idyllic, isolated paradise. As expected, the authority over this world remained firmly in his hands. Roy, on the other hand, was startled by the sudden shift. He immediately distanced himself from Roy, retreating to the farthest edge of this new realm. His incorporeal form flickered, becoming even more unstable. Realizing the cause of this change, Roy turned sharply, fixing Roy with a venomous glare. How is this possible? Why can he control such an immense mental world? But it didn't matter. Even if he couldn't corrupt a mental realm of this scale, all he needed was to destroy Roy's consciousness. The man had foolishly entered his own mental realm. How convenient. Die. Roa, a master of reincarnation magecraft, might have been physically weaker than many other dead apostle ancestors, but when it came to understanding and manipulating souls and mental energy, few could rival him. Though Roy's strength was formidable in the outside world, this was a mental realm. A battleground of souls and spiritual power. Here, no external strength could help him. Just surrender your body. Roa's eyes turned a chilling shade of bluish-violet as he unleashed a devastating mental assault on Roy. I'll make good use of your body. Slaughter Arcuaid and that fool Miram. After that, it'll be Altraja's turn, and then all those pathetic executors who dared to chase me. I'll settle every debt they owe me. Oh? Quite an ambitious plan you have. Still, looking at you like this, I can't help but find you pitiful. Pitiful? Roa barked a harsh laugh. At death's door, and you still have the audacity to mock me? He sneered cruelly. Soon enough, you'll understand who the real pitiful one is. As his words fell, the flower-filled realm rippled. A strange mental wave surged through the air, cutting directly toward Roy. The disturbance spread like concentric ripples on the surface of a calm lake, an anomaly in the tranquil world. Roy stood motionless, making no attempt to evade the attack. He waited, calm and unflinching, as the assault approached. As he anticipated, when the mental attack struck him, it left no mark. Not a trace of pain, harm, or discomfort. In fact, he felt nothing at all. It was as if a grain of sugar had dissolved into warm water, disappearing without a trace. Chapter 150, 150 Annihilated within the mental world, Roa executed a series of precise maneuvers, yet the results were negligible. As he watched Roy emerge unscathed from his soul-based attacks, an eerie silence enveloped the scene. Oh? Is that all you've got? Show me your best tricks. You might not get another chance. Roa's face twisted in horror, utterly baffled by what was unfolding before him. How is this possible? Not a single scratch. The soul was supposed to be the most fragile part of any being, and Roa prided himself on being a magus who specialized in targeting it. How could anyone withstand such a concentrated spiritual assault without even flinching? But the more frightened he became, the more chaotic and desperate his actions grew. In a blink, Roa vanished from Roy's sight, reappearing at different angles to launch a torrent of relentless spiritual attacks. To Roy, however, these attacks felt like nothing more than a warm breeze brushing past him. Gentle, almost ticklish, and entirely harmless. Roa circled him for what seemed an eternity, his attacks growing weaker with each passing moment. His expression contorted into one of frustration, and his spectral form flickered, becoming more and more translucent. His spiritual energy had clearly reached its limit. Is that all? Roy raised an eyebrow, casually brushing at the spot Roa had been attacking, as if dusting off his shoulder. The gesture, though simple, carried an air of utter disdain. Its psychological impact far exceeding its physical one. Impossible. Why are my spiritual attacks useless? Roa finally broke, his face a mix of panic and disbelief. What is your soul made of? The once menacing Roa now looked utterly shaken, his gaze fixed on Roy as if he were staring at a monster. Through repeated attempts, Roa had come to grasp the truth of their disparity. If his soul was a river, then Roy's was an endless ocean. No matter how hard he tried, his attacks vanished into nothingness, leaving not the slightest ripple. This was not a matter of skill but an overwhelming difference in magnitude. Roy's soul was at least 100 times more powerful than his own. It was at that moment Roa realized he had made a grave mistake. Had enough fun? Then it's my turn. Roy raised a hand, his tone light yet charged with finality. Let me introduce you to an old friend, Roa. With that, black flames surged from the depths of Roy's soul, erupting into the mental world. The once flourishing field of flowers ignited, consumed by the infernal blaze until the entire realm was enveloped in darkness. And then. It's been a while, Count. From within the black flames emerged a figure. A heroic spirit known as the King of the Cavern. Cra-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. Was it you who summoned me, my accomplice? But what's this? A foul-smelling serpent slithering around here? The Count's fiery gaze locked onto Roa, his expression darkening with an unmistakable killing intent. The black flames in his hand flared brighter, their heat searing the air around him. Impossible. This cannot be. Why are you here? He recognized this man. His murderer in a past life. The memory of his soul being scorched by those black flames, the excruciating torment, and the despair. It all came rushing back. No amount of reincarnations could erase the nightmare. Why was this man, this nightmare, here? Count, shall we fight side by side once more? Of course, my accomplice. Let's drag this wretched serpent into the abyss together. Cra-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. Roy smiled faintly, standing beside the manifestation of the King of the Cavern, a construct of his spiritual energy. Together, they turned toward Roa, whose escape routes were sealed by the encroaching flames. What followed was chaos. The fiery battlefield saw two figures moving at impossible speeds, their attacks relentless. Roa, overwhelmed and trapped, was seized, flung, and relentlessly pummeled. As the black flames continued to ravage his soul, Roa was filled with regret. Why had he ever dared to enter this man's body? To ensure there was no escape, Roy had erected barriers within his mental world, locking Roa in a realm where he could do nothing but endure the torment. By now, Roa fully understood the depth of his miscalculation. This man, both in body and soul, was an insurmountable monster. All his schemes had amounted to nothing more than digging his own grave. Trying to run? Seeing Roa muster every ounce of strength to escape the mental world, Roy had no intention of letting him succeed. With a wave of his hand, countless golden portals appeared behind him. Gate of Babylon. From within the portals, dozens of golden chains shot forth at incredible speed, catching up to Roa and binding his limbs, dragging him back with irresistible force. Enkidu. The golden chains proved remarkably useful. Having experienced them countless times in simulated battles, Roy could easily replicate their power and unleash them with mastery. Then came the next phase. Roy summoned the Gordius wheel, trampling Roa beneath its wheels, followed by wielding the Excalibur, enshrouded in black flames, to sever his limbs with a precise strike. Ah! The searing pain of the black flames, coupled with the relentless barrage of noble phantasms, pushed Roa's soul to its breaking point. Watching the now fractured remains of Roa's form, Roy knew it was time to conclude his experimentation with the noble phantasms. While he hadn't yet tested the wrong Omniad, he decided it was unnecessary to take things further. If the wrong Omniad struck Roa's current state, it would likely obliterate him entirely. But Roy was keenly aware that destroying Roa's soul might leave fragments behind, potentially allowing him to escape and plot revenge. That would be unacceptable. He needed to purge this loathsome serpent once and for all. Enough of this tedious play. It's time to end this farce. Looking down at the mangled, unrecognizable form of Roa, Roy spoke with chilling finality. This is where your journey ends. Finally. You're going to kill me? Roa, still suspended by the chains of Enkidu, let out a weak, derisive chuckle. His pallid face twisted into a mocking grin, and his shadowed eyes bore into Roy's. It's pointless. Even if you destroy my soul here, I will be reborn in the future. Heh. I've already prepared backups of my soul elsewhere. The moment you kill me, my next consciousness will awaken and find a new vessel. Not even those flames can completely erase my soul. Your efforts are futile. I'm aware of that. Roa's petty schemes had been obvious to him all along. They were similar to Tuko's resurrection techniques. Cunning but ultimately predictable. And that's precisely why I won't let you die so easily. I said I would erase you completely, didn't I? Erasure is not the same as death. What? That's impossible. Roa's pupils contracted in terror as a dreadful realization dawned upon him. If Roy intended what Roa feared, then his fate would be far worse than death. No, this can't happen. Overwhelmed by panic, Roa mustered what remained of his strength, attempting to self-destruct his soul in a final act of defiance. But nothing happened. He could feel his magical energy, but no matter how he tried to shatter his own soul, he remained alive. His existence had been forcibly stabilized. What's the point of struggling? I've added an immortality buff to your soul. No matter how you try to harm yourself, you won't die. The truth was now clear. When Roy detected Roa's contingency plan, he had taken steps to block any possibility of escape through death. By locking Roa in a state of half-life, half-death, he ensured that his consciousness couldn't transfer to any backup soul fragments. Roa was trapped. Enough chit-chat. While I won't destroy your soul entirely, there are plenty of fates worse than death awaiting you. With those words, Roy raised his hand and placed it on Roa's head. A radiant white light began to emanate from his palm. No. Stop. You can't do this to me. Roa shrieked, struggling in vain against the chains that held him. Release me. Let me go, you monster. I beg you, please. But Roy remained unmoved. He would not show mercy to such a vile creature. Heavens feel, soul transformation. Unlike the delicate precision Roy had used to save a child's life with this technique in the past, Roa's transformation required no such care. Maximizing the process, Roy reshaped Roa's soul, stripping it of all emotion and desire while leaving his consciousness intact. What remained was an undying soul, condemned to endless torment, incapable of reincarnation or harm. Stop. Don't touch my soul. Don't put that inside my head. Ah. As Roy's hand glowed brighter, the mutilated parts of Roa's soul began to reconstruct, their colors fading into pale, translucent whites. A shimmering film of light enveloped what remained, erasing every trace of his individuality. Finally, Roa's struggle ceased. His eyes dulled, his emotions vanished, and his sense of self was obliterated. What remained was a featureless white form, dripping from the chains of Enkidu-like liquid, before coalescing into a human-like shape. It stood silently, devoid of any semblance of life or will. The transformation was complete. Roa's emotions, desires, and identity were gone. Although his consciousness lingered, his existence was now hollow. Worse than death itself. Satisfied, Roy opened his reality marble, pulling the transformed Roa inside. Like the angel bound by the third magic, Roa became another piece of Roy's domain. A tool to be used, nothing more. For a monster that reveled in manipulating life, becoming an object of manipulation was the most fitting end. And so, the game concluded. The ex-seat dead apostle ancestor, serpent of Akasha, Michael Roa Valdamjong is hereby declared utterly annihilated. Chapter 151, 151 Abnormal Magical Fluctuations. Roy, wake up, please wake up. Don't keep sleeping. In the outside world, Arcuaid, who had rushed back at breakneck speed, arrived at the scene to find Roy lying amidst the ruins. Seal, who had also just arrived, was there as well. Arcuaid Brunistud? Seal, who had also sensed the commotion and arrived, saw Arcuaid holding Roy in the rubble. She looked at the still unconscious Roy and asked, what happened to him? Hearing the voice, Arcuaid turned her head to face the suddenly appearing Seal, her eyes filled with wariness. Her arms around Roy tightened even more. Roy defeated Vlad alone, but that despicable Roa took advantage of the situation. Now he's unconscious. He's been reincarnated by Roa. At Arcuaid's words, Seal's eyes narrowed slightly, her gaze fixed on the still sleeping Roy. The black keys hidden in her sleeves were already instinctively drawn into her palms. Roa. Just hearing that vile name was enough to ignite an uncontrollable rage in Seal. She wished she could tear that demon, who had ruined her life, into pieces right then and there. What are you planning to do? Sensing the obvious killing intent, Arcuaid shielded Roy behind her, her eyes equally filled with anger as she glared at Seal. I don't care what grudge you have against Roa, but as long as I'm here, you won't lay a finger on Roy. If you dare make a move, I will kill you. Seal didn't respond directly to Arcuaid. Instead, she sighed, but the black keys in her hands remained unsheathed, still radiating a cold, murderous intent. Step aside, White Princess of the true ancestors. He may no longer be the person you know. Killing him now, before Roa's reincarnation is complete, is the best solution. I know this is unfair to him, but do you really want to see Roa take over his body and wreak havoc? If Roa succeeds, I won't be able to stop him. Will you be able to fight him seriously then? Understanding Arcuaid's intentions and aware that her own actions were biased, Seal still made this choice. If Roa were to possess this body, no one present would be able to stop him, and the entire city would soon be plunged into an even more terrifying crisis. She was certain that this was not the outcome Roy would have wanted. Given the circumstances, she had no choice but to act. However, afterward, she would take full responsibility for this sin, offering herself to Arcuaid and his friends for whatever punishment they deemed fit. No matter the consequences, she would accept them. Impossible. Roy would never lose to that disgusting Roa. He'll be fine. He's just asleep. Arcuaid continued to shield Roy fiercely, refusing to let Seal approach. Her crimson eyes and the bloodied claws that had emerged from her hands made her stance clear. If Seal took one more step forward, she would attack without hesitation. Princess Maram, who had arrived last, witnessed the scene. Seeing Roy lying unconscious in Arcuaid's arms and a tense standoff between the princess and Seal, he immediately understood what was happening. He, too, felt a sense of helplessness. While he was absolutely loyal to the princess, in this situation, he found himself siding more with Seal. If Roa were to possess this body, no one in the dead apostle world, aside from the Black Princess and the White Princess, would be able to stand against him. The situation would only grow worse. But would the princess truly be able to strike down Roa, even if he wore Roy's face? He couldn't help but doubt it. For the sake of the princess and the safety of the entire dead apostle world, even if it meant betraying his duty, he had to act. Maram. Seeing Maram stand by her side, Seal understood his choice and felt a slight sense of relief. With the help of this seasoned veteran, her confidence in defeating Roa grew. Maram, hold off Arcuaid. I'll take care of him. Seal didn't want Maram to dirty his hands. This sin was hers alone to bear, there was no need to drag others into it. All right, but be quick. He glanced at the furious Arcuaid, sighed, and then stepped in front of her. How dare you, Maram? Seeing Maram and Seal instantly align themselves, Arcuaid let out a roar of anger. Maram could only sigh, reluctantly standing before Arcuaid and lowering his head as he whispered, "Forgive me, princess. For your sake, and for the safety of everyone, I have no choice but to make this decision." "Is that so? Then you can die too." At this point, there was no need for further pretense. Arcuaid had completely turned against Meram. If he dared to stop her, she would show no mercy. Just as the tension reached its peak, a single spark away from igniting all-out conflict, a familiar voice emerged from Arcuaid's arms. "What are you all gathered here for? A midnight sparring session?" Roy, who had just opened his eyes, found himself tightly embraced by the golden-haired princess. Seeing the two executors across from him radiating killing intent, he immediately understood the situation. "Roy." Seeing Roy awake, Arcuaid immediately wrapped her arms around his neck, her voice filled with emotion. Thank goodness, thank goodness. I knew you'd be fine. Be careful, princess. He might be Roa. Meram urgently warned. But Arcuaid, who was intimately familiar with both Roa's and Roy's auras, confidently replied, Impossible. Roy is Roy. He's not Roa. Their scents are completely different. But... Meram wanted to say more, but Roy spoke first. He gave Arcuaid a reassuring hug. Sorry for worrying you. Then, turning to Meram and Seal, he said, Don't worry, you too. Roa has been dealt with. Permanently. He won't be reincarnating ever again. What do you mean? Seal, who harbored the deepest grudge against Roa, frowned, her eyes flashing with disbelief. Exactly what I said. I've transformed Roa into a special kind of existence. His emotions, desires, and even his sense of self have been eradicated. He will never reincarnate and threaten the world again. As for how I did it, allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Roy, the current magician of the third magic. The magic I command is Heaven's Feel. A magician? Hearing this thunderous title, Seal fell silent, while Meram's eyebrows twitched slightly. Compared to the titles of the 27 dead apostle ancestors or the lords of the clock tower, the title of magician carried far more weight. Only those who wielded miracles could be called magicians. No wonder he was so powerful. His true identity was that of a new magician. Heaven's Feel. I see, I see. Unlike Seal, who was relatively inexperienced and uninterested in the intricacies of magecraft, Meram, who had lived for an unknown length of time, immediately understood the significance of Roy's words. Unable to contain himself, Meram burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, I never would have thought that Roa, that fool, would try to possess the body of the magician of the third magic. Roa may have been a master of reincarnation and mental attacks, but the third magic is a miracle specifically targeting the soul. For Roa to encounter you was like a mouse meeting a cat. An absolute natural enemy. That idiot Roa truly brought about his own destruction. This outcome is nothing but his own doing. Seeing the expected turn of events, Arcuaid felt a sense of unreality, but she trusted Roy's words. This meant she no longer had to chase Roa across the world. Her mission in the outside world was over, and she would soon return to the Millennium Castle. But even though she had mentally prepared herself for this long ago, why did she still feel a lingering sense of reluctance? Alright, Roa and Love have been dealt with. Now we can finally... Wait, no. Huh? Cutting off the casual conversation, Roy, who had regained some of his strength, suddenly frowned. He immediately channeled his magical energy, opening all his senses to detect the source of the abnormal magical fluctuations. Chapter 152, 152 Princess Roy immediately sensed several abnormal surges of magical energy on the outskirts of Misaki town. One of these sources belonged to Oko, while the identity of the other was unfamiliar. Judging by its aura, it radiated a power far beyond what any human could possess. Within the same vicinity, he could faintly detect the residual magical energy of Shiki and Alice. Though their presence was weak, like whispers fading into the night. However, it was the clash of two overwhelming magical forces that truly seized his attention. The violent collision of their immense powers carved through life indiscriminately, harvesting souls with every devastating pulse. No wonder Oko and the others hadn't reached the city yet. They had encountered formidable adversaries. But what kind of monster could possibly force Oko Ozaki, the magician of the fifth magic, and the pure witch, Alice, into such a desperate struggle? The sheer scale of this magical force dwarfed even that of Love Archangel, whom Roy had only recently vanquished. If his memory served him right, Shiki and Tuko were supposed to be accompanying Oko. Yet, he couldn't sense any trace of Tuko's magic. Which could only mean one thing. Damn it. A surge of dread flooded his mind as grim possibilities took root. Without wasting another second, he abandoned all pretense of composure. Rising to his feet, flames burst around him, propelling his figure like a comet streaking toward the direction of the witch's manor. Wait for me, I'm on my way. The brief silence that followed was shattered as a brilliant streak of white light carved through Misaki town's night sky, leaving the onlookers momentarily stunned. Huh? Roy, wait for me. Recovering quickly, Arcuaid reacted instinctively. Raising her arms, she conjured a pair of magnificent wings through conceptual manifestation, pushing herself to the limit to catch up, her form struggling but determined to match Roy's blistering pace. What? What just happened? Realizing something was amiss, Miriam wasted no time. With a swift incantation, she summoned her mechanical familiar, commanding it to follow the soaring figures. Only Seal remained, her mobility far inferior to the others, left standing alone amid the sudden emptiness. In mere moments, the three figures who had been by her side had vanished without a trace. Gazing up at the night sky, Seal let out a long, weary sigh. Concern gnawed at her heart, but she forced herself to move, relying solely on her own strength to chase after them, her pace slower but fueled by determination. She couldn't help but grumble inwardly. Is flying really that impressive? Interesting, very interesting. Roa, Vlav, and NRVNQSR are all dead, and now even the child of Inash has begun to sprout here. To claim the life of my foolish sister, that old fox Ross has indeed played a grand move this time. He even dispatched child of Inash along with his elite forces. High above Nisaki town, Altraj, known as the Black Princess of the Dead Apostles, gazed down upon the unfolding events, flanked by her two loyal knights. She had arrived long before, witnessing quite the spectacle. A performance orchestrated by Magi and the Dead Apostle ancestors. As Roy and his companions departed, Altraj turned to her black and white knights, her voice cool and inquisitive. What do you make of tonight's events? The Black Knight, Strout, lowered his head, the first to speak. In just half a month, 3 Dead Apostle ancestors have been buried in this city. Moreover, even Child of Inash has appeared in such an obscure place. This cannot be mere coincidence. Regardless of how foolish NRVNQSR Chaos and Vlav Archangel were, Roa alone could never have drawn Child of Inash here. Someone is orchestrating a grand scheme, using Roa as a pawn to kill Arcuaid. Oh? And who do you suspect this mastermind to be? Altraj nodded slightly, signaling him to continue. Without a doubt, it is the White-Winged Lord, TRHVMN Orton Ross. That old relic has gone to great lengths to achieve his goal, deploying not just Child of Inash but also his elite forces. His ambition knows no bounds. The Black Knight's voice was firm. Though the roles of the other ancestors remain unclear, the one pulling the strings behind this grand game can only be him. Indeed, I am well aware of this. But Orton Ross, sly as ever, merely tempts and provides resources. Even if his dead apostle troops are captured, the curse marks will trigger, ensuring their deaths and leaving no evidence. Since he hasn't acted directly, I have no grounds to execute him outright. Altraj nodded thoughtfully. Furthermore, with NRVNQSR Chaos and Vlav Archangel both slain by the Guardian beside Arcuaid, there's no concrete proof. That cunning old fox has skillfully extricated himself from the vortex. However, Orton Ross's reach has grown too bold. If he's dared to target my foolish sister this time, perhaps next time, he'll set his sights on me. She turned her gaze to the Black and White Knights, her tone cool yet commanding. If that day comes, what will you do? We shall sweep away all your enemies, princess. Without hesitation, the two knights knelt, pledging their unwavering loyalty. The Orton Ross was powerful, as Dead Apostle ancestor themselves, they were far from weak. Certainly not ones to fear him. Good. Once we return, ensure you sever any of Orton Ross's overreaching claws. Consider it a warning for his transgressions. And if he dares to resist, use it as an excuse to eliminate him. In just a few brief minutes, Altraj had already charted Orton Ross's fate, ready to assert her authority as princess. Then, she posed another question to her knights. The guardian beside my foolish sister. Do either of you believe you can kill him? The knights hesitated, exchanging glances before replying. No. In a one-on-one battle, neither of us would stand a chance. Even together, our chances of victory wouldn't exceed 30%. His power is far too overwhelming. I doubt the strength he displayed when killing Vlav was his full potential. However, if you truly wish for his death, princess, we are willing to stake our lives for the attempt. Altraj nodded slightly, raising her hand to signal them to rise, satisfied with their loyalty. There's no need. We have no conflict of interest with him, and I do not wish for you to die in vain. Even if, one day, my foolish sister dares challenge me with him by her side, I will never lose. Indeed, proud as ever, Altraj paid no mind to the new ally at Arcuaid's side. Her confidence in herself was absolute, the embodiment of nobility and pride. Then, princess, what should we do next? We'll observe from afar. There's no need to interfere in their battle with Child of Inash. I also wish to see just how far my foolish sister, Arcuaid, has grown. With a faint smile, Altraj turned, issuing her command to the knights. As you command, princess. Chapter 153, 153 Sea of Trees. White flames flickered around his body as Roy, his brow furrowed, transformed into a streak of light, darting through the air at high speed. Behind him, Arcuaid mimicked the form of a bird, manifesting a pair of massive wings to keep pace. As they approached the vicinity of the witch's manor, both noticed the peculiar barrier that enveloped the area. Something was definitely wrong. It was this very barrier that had severed the communication signals between them, effectively masking the disturbances and magical fluctuations in the vicinity. This clever ruse had allowed the enemy to operate undetected, even under the watchful eyes of Arcuaid and Meram. Annoying obstacle, don't block my way. Landing near the barrier, Roy, concerned for the safety of Shiki and Tuko, wasted no time. He pressed his palm against the barrier, his magical circuits surging with energy. A torrent of magical power erupted from his hand, shattering the barrier that stood in his path. Not just a diversion, but a three-pronged assault. You've done well, Roa. As Roy approached the manor, the true nature of the immense magical source became clear. A lush, verdant forest exuded an aura of malevolence. Countless twisted branches coiled around each other, and atop each tree hung crimson, gem-like fruits that were both eerie and alluring. What a bizarre existence. With such a monstrosity lurking in the forest, it was no wonder Oko and the others had been delayed. Roy quickly grasped the situation and began to piece together the true nature of the writhing forest beneath him. Arcuaid, who had followed closely behind, was equally stunned by the horrifying sight. She hesitated for a moment before exclaiming, "This sea of trees. It's the forest of Inash. But why is it here? So, it's that monster after all." Hearing Arcuaid's confirmation, Roy's concern deepened. He was familiar with the forest of Inash. A creature that preyed on all life. Any living being that entered its domain would become its next meal. Shiki, Oko, Tuko, and Alice were undoubtedly trapped within this terrifying, man-eating forest. While he trusted Oko to protect Shiki and Alice, the forest's sinister nature and the passage of time left him deeply worried. If anything had happened to them, Roy dared not dwell on the thought. Activating his mystic eyes, he unleashed his most powerful attack, determined to obliterate the forest blocking his path as quickly as possible. "Get out of my way, you monster." A black flame sword materialized in his hand, and with a swift motion, he brought it down. The fiery blade, radiating intense heat and energy, effortlessly tore through the thicket of vines. However, the forest of Inash, with its tenacious vitality, quickly regenerated the gaps. The forest's will directed its vines toward Roy, seeking to ensnare him and turn him into nourishment. "Back off." A burst of white flames erupted around him, effortlessly crushing the encroaching trees and vines. "Calm down, Roy. Indiscriminate attacks like this won't get you to the core of the forest of Inash." As Roy and Arcuaid paused to clear the twisted forest before them, Meram arrived on the scene, riding his mechanical puppet, the King of the Sky. Observing the writhing forest, he quickly deduced the situation. Artenross must have gone all out, entrusting something like this to Roa. Indeed, while Roa couldn't control the true forest of Inash or determine its location, he could manipulate its offspring. The children of Inash. Legend had it that from the ripened fruits of the forest of Inash, drops of blood would occasionally fall. Some of these drops would transform into seeds, lying dormant underground before evolving differently from their parent. Thus, the children of Inash were born. With just a drop of blood from the crimson fruit and sufficient magical energy to accelerate growth, this forest could rapidly take root and expand across the land. The fact that this child of Inash had grown to such a size in such a short time indicated that it had tapped into the local ley line, voraciously consuming the life force of the forest. The numerous dead apostles Roa had left in this forest weren't meant to fight Oko and Alice. They were merely fodder, nourishment to accelerate the forest's growth. The ley line's magical energy, combined with the flesh and blood of the dead apostles and other forest creatures, had allowed the forest to reach this scale in such a short time. This realization brought Meram some relief. The true forest of Inash was a formidable foe, a monster that even the Holy Church struggled to counter. It was akin to an overwhelming reality marble. While the children of Inash shared similarities with their parent, they consumed their stored magical energy in one go, disappearing after a single appearance. Mages within the true forest of Inash would find it impossible to draw upon the greater source of magical energy, but within this child of Inash, though difficult, it was still possible. The difference in strength between the two was like night and day, which is why Meram felt a sense of relief. If this had been the true forest of Inash, not only would this forest be a problem, but the entire city of Misaki would have been sacrificed to the endless sea of trees. "Do you have any ideas, Meram?" Seeing Meram arrive, Arcuaid immediately sought his advice on how to deal with the forest. "The method is simple. Cut off the child of Inash's supply of magical energy, then attack it from a distance with long-range spells. Once its energy is depleted, it will vanish on its own. But this method would take several days. It's the simplest and safest approach. By containing its movements here, we can achieve victory without direct confrontation." Meram proposed the safest course of action. I can summon executors to seal off the forest and use fire to gradually deplete its energy. It won't take long. Before Miriam could finish, Roy interrupted. No. Shiki and Oko are trapped inside. Whether they can hold out for several days is uncertain, and I can't stand by while they fight alone. But other methods. No need to trouble yourself, Father Miriam. I'll handle the rest. Roy turned to Miriam and Arcuaid. I'll go in alone to rescue them. You two stay here and contain the forest, preventing it from expanding toward the city. Understood. I'll keep it in check. Miriam nodded without hesitation, and the King of the Sky behind him echoed the sentiment. Leave it to me, command. Halt the expansion of the forest of Inash. Executing immediately, thank you. I'll leave it to you. No. I'm coming too. Shiki is my friend. I can't just stay here. Arcuaid began to protest, but Roy gently placed a hand over her mouth, leaning in to whisper something in her ear. After a few seconds, Arcuaid's expression softened. Though still conflicted, she lowered her hand and nodded. All right, but please be careful, Roy. I will. I'm counting on you. With that, Roy prepared to force his way into the forest, no longer willing to waste time on its twisted defenses. It was time to get a little reckless. Magical energy surged. Condensed, collapsed, compressed, then expanded. A bubble-like sphere formed at his fingertips. The ultimate offensive spell, prepared and ready, was unleashed at an extreme distance. In the next instant, the twisted forest before him began to melt away. The light was like a comet piercing the night sky, or a crescent moon soaring into the heavens. A blinding white light, carrying immense magical energy and heat, effortlessly tore through all obstacles in its path. A wide, clear path was carved through the writhing forest. Magical energy conversion, full power, annihilation mode. Chapter 154, 154 Subjugation. At the heart of the area engulfed by the Child of Inash, the twisted forest continued to close in from all directions, its relentless assault unending. This is never ending. This forest is determined to devour us. Oko Ozaki muttered, her voice heavy as she observed the waves of attacks crashing toward them for what felt like the 100th time. If we keep dragging this out, it won't end well. Oko. You should take Shiki and leave. Don't worry about me. Oko had the strength to escape if she truly wanted to. The forest wouldn't be able to stop her. Alice Kuonji knew this. She knew Oko was staying, fighting this hopeless battle, solely because of her. They could leave, but the mansion behind them, her mother's most precious gift, could not. Alice couldn't bring herself to abandon it, even if it meant dying alongside it. But Oko and Shiki had no reason to risk their lives for her sake. She was the one holding them back. Alice, what nonsense are you spouting? Oko shot her a glare, her tone laced with irritation as she continued to fend off the encroaching forest. We're best friends. If I abandoned you over something like this, what kind of friend would I be? It's just a stupid forest. I'll wipe it out in one go. Being a magician isn't just for show, you know. With that, Oko raised her hand, forming a finger gun gesture, and unleashed a devastating magical blast that tore through a large swath of the forest. Her crimson hair fluttered in the wind stirred by the explosion, her eyes filled with determination. As long as she stood there, not a single branch would reach her friends. Idiot. Stop talking nonsense. Meanwhile, Shiki, who had retreated to the second line of defense, glanced at Alice, who was visibly drained from the constant magical exertion. She helped her into the mansion to rest. Instead of worrying about that, focus on recovering. We don't know how long we'll have to hold out before he arrives. Though Shiki wasn't close to Alice. They had only met a few times. She wasn't the type to abandon a comrade. Thanks to Avalon, her injuries had mostly healed, and she was ready to continue fighting. However, the forest was a poor match for her abilities. While the vines she cut would wither and die, the sheer scale of the forest made her efforts feel insignificant. Venturing deeper would only invite ambushes from all sides, so she heeded Oko's advice and stayed back, not wanting to burden the team. If she had wanted to escape, she would have done so the moment she crawled out of the river. Instead, she had followed the flames and vines all the way here. Thank you. Alice murmured softly as she watched Shiki's retreating figure. Shiki tightened her grip on her dagger and continued to guard the perimeter of the mansion. Despite her bravado, Oko was growing increasingly frustrated. The forest's attacks were becoming more frequent, and though her magical blasts kept them at bay, the relentless assault was wearing her down. While the Child of Inash didn't completely sever the connection to the greater source of magical energy like the true forest of Inash, it still made drawing upon it incredibly difficult. This inferior version of a reality marble severely limited Alice's abilities as a traditional witch. She couldn't risk sending her hounds into the forest, knowing they would be devoured. Using magical blasts to fend off such a monster was inefficient at best. Damn it, If only I had a reality marble of my own. The more she thought, the more she thought of Roy's reality marble. The best way to counter a reality marble was with another. A clash of worlds that would neutralize the forest's oppressive effects. She had once been proud of her mastery of magical blasts and the fifth magic, believing few in the world could rival her. But Roy, Arcuaid, and the dead apostle ancestors had shown her just how naive that belief was. Now, she was arguably the weakest among the current magicians. Losing to Zelrach was one thing. He was a veteran far beyond her inexperience. But Roy, a fellow inheritor of a magic, had surpassed her by leaps and bounds. The fifth magic of the Ozaki family was no weaker than the third, but she was the one who had fallen behind. Aoko resolved to stop slacking off after this ordeal. She would dedicate herself to improving her magical prowess alongside Alice. But first, they had to survive. Whoosh! As Aoko pondered her next move, a sudden sense of danger jolted her. The forest, sensing the absence of two fighters, launched a coordinated attack from all sides. Beneath her feet, around her, and even from above. Damn it, you're really underestimating me. Aoko reacted instantly, raising her hand to unleash another magical blast. Need some help, Miss Aoko? A familiar voice, tinged with a hint of playfulness, reached her ears. She turned to see Roy standing behind her. You. Before she could question him, Roy smiled and reminded her, don't lose focus in battle, Ms. Aoko. The attack's coming. Huh? The surging forest closed in, but before Aoko could fire her magical blast, Roy acted first. Mimicking her gesture, he formed a finger gun and unleashed a devastating blast of his own. Full power, magic bullet. The attack was simple, almost effortless, but its power was on par with Aoko's own. The incoming vines were obliterated in an instant, their remnants scattering to the ground. How's that? My magic bullet isn't too shabby compared to the magician of the fifth magics, right? Barely passable. But who asked for your help? I could have handled this myself. Magic bullet. Not to be outdone, Aoko fired several cyan magical bullets, clearing the rest of the forest in the vicinity. The child of Inash within a 500-meter radius has been cleared. Roy activated his mystic eyes to gauge the distance, then turned and waved to Shiki near the mansion. I'm here, Shiki. Aoko, Shiki, and Alice's magical signatures were all present, but Tuko's was nowhere to be found. Had she died? Or was she lost somewhere in the forest? It didn't matter. As long as the three of them were safe, Tuko could always revive by transferring to a new body. You're late. Seeing Roy, the weight pressing on Shiki's heart finally lifted. Just his presence brought her a sense of calm, a feeling that everything would be alright. Roy then turned to Aoko. Can you still fight? Who do you think I am? Don't underestimate me. Good. Since you've still got some fight left, let's end this quickly. We'll wipe out this forest in one go. Wipe it out in one go? Aoko understood his plan immediately. You're planning to destroy the entire child of Inash? Exactly. For a monster rooted in the ley line, this is the simplest and most effective solution. Though to clarify, this isn't the true forest of Inash. It's just a monster grown from its fruit, feeding on the ley line to reach this size. But how? I've already tried large-scale bombardment to clear a path, but the forest just regenerates. Since it's rooted in the ley line, it's tough to deal with, but I have a solution. Roy explained his plan. Now that I've located you, I can unleash a large-scale destructive attack. We don't need to completely destroy it. Just trigger a violent reaction. A violent reaction? Yes. Once the child of Inash goes berserk, I'll use my reality marble to drag the entire forest inside. In that world, there's no ley line to sustain it. Miram told me that while the child of Inash shares similarities with the true forest of Inash, it consumes all its stored magical energy at once and disappears after a single use. If we cut off its connection to the ley line, it'll die quickly. Use a reality marble to envelop and sever the entire forest's magical supply? Are you serious? Aoko was skeptical. The forest spanned roughly 7 kilometers. If she launched a large-scale attack, it would provoke a fierce counterattack from the forest. Could Roy really cover such a vast area with his reality marble? It sounded impossible. Well, using a reality marble on this scale is a first for me. While it's theoretically possible, there might be some issues in practice. If something goes wrong, I'll leave it to you to handle, Ms. Aoko. Take care of Shiki and Alice for me. I'll handle the rest. Alright, I'll trust you on this. Though she still resented Roy for surpassing her, she knew he was ridiculously strong. For now, she had no choice but to rely on him. Since the plan's set, let's get started. Chapter 155, 155 The Misaki Incident High-Speed Divine Words. Mono Reinforcement. And then, the incantation began. Rise, green star, silver desert, under the black Sunday Mercury, gold, Philosopher's Stone, Pillar of Heaven. Unite the 4 points, and the miracle that descends will be your domain. Roy's body floated in midair, his surging magical energy drawing the attention of the forest of Inash. Despite the writhing forest closing in from all directions, his expression remained unflinching. With a swift motion, he formed a series of hand seals, channeling his magical energy. The principles of the soul manifested at the intersection of his palms. In the blink of an eye, as the forest surged toward him, Roy unleashed his most powerful spell. Heaven Him. There were no restrictions this time. Roy pushed his limits, expanding his reality marble to its fullest extent. Encompassing the entire forest. The expanding domain enveloped the child of Inash, which had been enraged by the magician of the 5th magic's assault, in an instant. The white and distorted spatial light left even Altraj and her knights, observing from a distance, momentarily dazzled. The white magical light painted a surreal image across the sky, visible to everyone within several kilometers. This scene was nothing short of divine. Fall back. Seeing the sudden expansion of the white domain, Altraj immediately shouted to her 2 knights. Reacting swiftly to their princess's command, the black and white knights channeled their magical energy and retreated at high speed, narrowly escaping the domain's pull. That was too close. He actually enveloped the entire forest in a reality marble? The white knight, who had been closest to the domain, felt a lingering fear. If not for Altraj's warning, he would have been dragged into the reality marble along with the child of Inash. The sheer scale of what had just happened left him utterly stunned. What do you think? Altraj, the Black Princess of the Dead Apostles, asked her knights. Terrifying. It's beyond words. It doesn't feel like something a Magus could achieve. It's more like something only a god could do. They watched as the massive forest, spanning several kilometers in diameter, was engulfed by the blinding white light and vanished from sight, leaving only the scarred earth as evidence of its rampage. In an instant, the entire forest had been uprooted. While the child of Inash isn't on the same level as the true forest of Inash's reality marble, it still functions as a degraded version of one. What he just did was essentially envelop one reality marble with another. And his reality marble has a capture range spanning several kilometers. The Black Knight pondered for a moment before offering his analysis. When 2 reality marbles collide, the outcome depends on which one has the overwhelming advantage. His reality marble completely overpowered the child of Inash's internal world. We couldn't do something like this. While we have countless ways to kill the child of Inash, directly overwhelming it with a reality marble is beyond us. The White Knight, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. This man's power is terrifying. With strength like this, he could overturn the world's order. Just who is he, indeed? It seems my foolish sister has stumbled upon quite the treasure this time. Princess, should we go down and meet him? No need. My visit was merely out of curiosity about Arcuaid's schemes. Now that Roa's matter is resolved, she won't linger in the outside world for long. I have no desire to see her yet. Besides, Altraj's gaze shifted warily to the spot where the white light had vanished. Though it had only been a fleeting moment, and even her knights hadn't noticed, she had sensed it. His hostility toward her. He had detected their presence but was preoccupied with the child of Inash. The sudden expansion of the white light wasn't accidental, he had genuinely intended to drag her and her knights into his reality marble. Fortunately, her reflexes were sharp. The moment she sensed his hostility, she immediately retreated with her knights beyond the domain's reach. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Though she couldn't fathom what lay within that white light, she had no desire to risk her life to find out. Once trapped inside, escape would no longer be in her hands. Having narrowly avoided disaster, Altraj lost all interest in spectating further. She ordered her knights to prepare for their departure. Let's return. It's time to have a word with Ortenross about his little schemes. Yes. The Black and White Knights bowed their heads and followed Altraj as she left. The investigation had yielded clear results. Her foolish sister had left the Millennium Castle after detecting the presence of Roa's latest reincarnation, leading her to this remote region in Japan. As for NRVNQSR and Vlov, they had been dispatched by Ortenross to eliminate Arcuaid and solidify his own position. But now, Roa's latest reincarnation had been destroyed, and the other 2 dead apostle ancestors had been confirmed dead. The perpetrator? Arcuaid's protector in Japan. As for whether he would be granted the title of one of the 27 dead apostle ancestors, that remained to be decided. Tuko Ozaki felt she had been a bit unlucky lately. She had come to Misaki City to assist her employer in hunting dead apostles, only to die twice without accomplishing anything. The first death was due to her carelessness, falling victim to her foolish sister's sneak attack. Though she didn't mind much, given the pleasant memories she had gained from this trip, the second death was downright embarrassing. She, a grand puppeteer and one of the most renowned magi in the world, had been killed by a landmine, Who would believe such a story? Enough was enough. She had been careless, but now she was ready to return and settle the score. However, upon her return, she realized her sense of time was slightly off. Since she had used the nearest body for her first resurrection, her second revival point was farther than expected. But this was no obstacle for her. After spending a considerable sum to secure passage, she boarded a high-speed train to Misaki City. She had died last night and arrived this morning. A mere dozen hours later. Yet, in those short hours, Misaki City had undergone unimaginable chaos. First, a massive fire and explosion had erupted in the eastern district, with cultists, dead apostles transformed by a curse, rampaging through the streets. Then, a rain of steel swords fell from the sky in the west, damaging buildings and turning the city as a landmark into a pincushion. But that wasn't all. Survivors from the eastern district claimed to have seen a superhero defeating monsters, leaving the police baffled. They attributed these accounts to hallucinations caused by toxic fumes from the fire, and the survivors were taken to the church for psychological counseling. And then, the dense forest on the outskirts of Misaki City had vanished overnight, leaving only a scarred wasteland. Witnesses claimed to have seen the forest come alive, writhing like a giant serpent, before a white light engulfed it, causing it to disappear. The police were at a loss. The series of events had pushed the city's mayor, who was on the verge of retirement, to suffer a heart attack and collapse. Those who had witnessed the truth were dismissed as having had vivid dreams and were sent to the church for counseling. Though the severity of the incident had reached the highest echelons of power, causing outrage among the influential figures in the magical world, Marum and Seal of the Burial Agency, along with other executors, worked tirelessly through the night. They rounded up the remaining dead apostles and most of the witnesses, handling the aftermath. The cost of damages far exceeded the budget, leaving the Holy Church headquarters wondering if Marum and his team had dismantled an entire city. However, upon learning that the incident involved multiple dead apostle ancestors and the child of Inash, and that Marum and Seal had confirmed the deaths of NRV and QSR Chaos, 10th seat, and Vlav Archangel, 19th seat, in Misaki City, the opposition within the church fell silent. Roa, being an ex-seat with a history of multiple resurrections, was reported as having his current reincarnation confirmed dead, though no guarantees were made about his permanent elimination. While the compensation costs were painful, the deaths of 2 dead apostle ancestors were a significant victory. The church was astounded by the events in Japan. What on earth had happened in that city? Due to the high death toll and the incident's massive impact, the church explained to the public that a series of gas pipeline explosions, caused by poor maintenance, had led to the tragedy in Misaki City. However, the detailed records were classified as top secret within the Holy Church, accessible only to the Pope, members of the Burial Agency, and the Inquisition. The higher-ups named this catastrophic event the Misaki Incident. Chapter 156, 156 Peace. By the next morning, most of the participants from the previous night's events had gathered at the Kuonji Witch's mansion. However, aside from Alice Kuonji, who was still exhausted from the prolonged battle and resting in her room, the others showed little signs of fatigue. Tuko Aozaki had refreshed her state by dying once, Oko Aozaki and Roy had stabilized their conditions using their respective magics, Shiki Ryougi was carrying Avalon, and Arcuaid had barely been involved. Last night, she had merely gone through the motions with Marum, while Roy had single-handedly dealt with Vlav, Roa, and the child of Inash. All she had done was keep watch from the sidelines, contributing little to the actual fight. Even her attempt to kill Roa had backfired, nearly putting Roy in danger. She had been the one being protected all along. The thought left her feeling disheartened, so she decided to go out for a walk to clear her mind. This incident saw the elimination of 2 active dead apostle ancestors and the complete resolution of the Roa problem. Roy remarked, leaning back in his chair. With this, everything should be settled. The intense week-long ordeal had finally come to an end, and now he could afford to relax for a while. Yeah. Though it was supposed to be a team effort, you were the one who solved everything. Oko said, her tone tinged with frustration. What had seemed like a group effort had essentially been Roy carrying the entire battle on his shoulders. Even though the battlefield was in her city, and she was the one responsible for managing the ley lines, she had merely played a supporting role. All the tough opponents had been handled by Roy. Worse still, due to her poor compatibility with the situation, she hadn't even managed to take down a single child of Inash. Tuko, who had returned that morning, couldn't resist taunting Oko, who was slumped in her chair. Well, I heard all about last night's events from Shiki. As expected, Oko, you were as useless as ever. Even as a magician, you couldn't handle a single offspring of a dead apostle ancestor? Don't act so high and mighty, Tuko. If we're talking about incompetence, you, a Grand Magus wannabe, were the first to be taken out. By the time you came back, everything was already over. If we're comparing, you're the more useless one here. Oko shot back, glaring at her sister. If she hadn't been so drained from spending half the night exchanging magical blasts with the forest of Inash, she would have gladly put her older sister in her place, reminding her who was stronger now. Still, because of those monsters' sudden attack, Misaki City suffered quite a few casualties. Thankfully, the church managed to cover it up and even took care of the compensation for the damages. Oko said, letting out a sigh of relief. Half the city was blown up, and several kilometers of forest near the mansion were destroyed. If I had to cover the compensation as the city's manager, even selling off the Ozaki family wouldn't be enough. The forest near Alice's mansion, connected to the child of Inash, had been dragged into Roy's reality marble and annihilated by the angel, leaving behind only scattered wood chips. The area now looked barren and out of place. But given the circumstances, it was a miracle that the fragile mansion had survived. Alice only cared about the mansion itself. The surrounding forest could always be replanted. By the way, where's Shiki? Is she still wandering around outside? Oko suddenly remembered the girl who had fought alongside her last night. No, the church took over the task of dealing with the remaining dead apostles. She's probably somewhere practicing her swordplay, still processing the events of last night. Tuko replied. Ah, it seems this experience has left quite an impact on her. A significant impact? Being nearly taken out by a bomb alongside you made her feel inadequate. She thinks she needs to improve further. Inadequate. Tuko frowned. Wasn't that indirectly including her as well? Though, being taken out so early was indeed a sign of incompetence. Well, it's not a big deal. She's still young, and with those eyes of hers, her future is bound to be bright. Tuko sighed, expressing her helplessness toward the girl's determination. However, Shiki feels that her mastery of the mystic eyes of death perception and her overall training are still lacking. I had hoped she could use her eyes to help Arcuaid with her bloodlust, but it wasn't entirely successful. Eh? Even those eyes couldn't completely eliminate Arcuaid's bloodlust. Tuko was intrigued. She was well aware of the power of the mystic eyes of death perception. Roy shook his head. It worked, but not completely. At best, it suppressed Arcuaid's bloodlust for a few hundred years. It didn't address the root of the problem. While Arcuaid thinks this is already a good outcome, Shiki clearly isn't satisfied. The main issue was that he hadn't seen Void Shiki in a long time. If she had been the one to act, the problem could have been resolved. He had tried to get Shiki to summon Void Shiki, her third personality, but received no response. Still, the situation had been resolved quite satisfactorily, and everyone had achieved a relatively happy ending. So, boss, what's next? Are we leaving right away? Yes, it's about time. Zelrach's commission has been fulfilled to this extent, and there's no need for me to stay any longer. Once I handle a few remaining matters, I'll be on my way. With that, Roy stood up from his chair. Leaving so soon? Miram wants to meet me at the church. He has something to discuss. I'll head out now, Tuko. If anything comes up, just call me. You're free to leave whenever you want. Your task is complete. Understood. After all this trouble, I still didn't contribute much. What a failure. Tuko muttered, leaning back in Roy's chair and lighting a cigarette as she watched him leave. But not being scolded for it. Working under such a boss might not be so bad after all. Hey, Tuko. Seeing Roy leave, Oko, surprisingly, initiated a conversation with her sister, catching Tuko off guard. Huh? What do you want now? Tuko frowned, eyeing her younger sister with suspicion. Relax, I'm not here to pick a fight. I just have something I want to ask you. Ask me? You? Tuko's eyes widened in shock, the cigarette nearly falling from her mouth. Had the sun risen from the west? Oko was actually seeking her advice? She reached out, feeling Oko's forehead, then her own, her confusion deepening. No fever. So why are you acting so strange? Did you not get enough sleep? Tuko's teasing finally pushed Oko over the edge, and she snapped back in her usual abrasive tone. Idiot. I'm not sick. I just want to ask you, as a holder of the grand title, if you know how to quickly master a reality marble. Master a reality marble? You? Tuko was stunned. You? A reality marble? Ha 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 ha, you can't even grasp basic magical theory, and now you want to master a reality marble? Are you trying to kill me with laughter? She burst into laughter, clutching her stomach. You're only strong because of your magic and innate abilities. Your understanding of magecraft, origins, and bounded fields is practically zero. Seeing someone else use a reality marble and wanting to learn it yourself? How naive, my foolish little sister. If it were that easy to learn, I would have mastered it by now. Why would I wait for you to ask me? After all the talk, you don't know how to do it either. What right do you have to laugh at me? True, I don't know how, but at least I have some self-awareness. Unlike you, my dear, foolish sister. Who are you calling foolish? After their usual bickering, the two sisters, as if destined to be rivals, inevitably ended up in a scuffle inside Alice's mansion. And, as expected, they were both thrown out by the mansion's owner, who had been woken up by their noise. Chapter 157, 157 Confession. The meeting spot Miriam had arranged with Roy wasn't at the Misaki City Church but at a quiet park on the outskirts of the city. When Roy arrived, Miriam Solomon had already been waiting there with Arcuaid for some time. Seeing Arcuaid swinging on a park swing with Miriam standing nearby, Roy greeted them with a wave. Hey, Arcuaid. Ah, you're here, Roy. Noticing Roy's arrival, Arcuaid hopped off the swing and ran over to him, her face lit up with joy. What's up? Arcuaid, and Father Miriam, is there something you needed to talk to me about? Arcuaid aside, Miriam definitely had a reason for calling him here. Mr. Roy, I apologize for calling you out so soon after such a grueling battle. Miriam began, his tone respectful and apologetic. This respect wasn't just due to Roy's overwhelming strength but also out of gratitude for protecting Arcuaid and for finally putting an end to Roa, fulfilling Arcuaid's long-standing mission. It's fine. I've mostly recovered. Roy replied, shaking his head before turning to Miriam. So, what's the important matter you wanted to discuss at this hour? Yes. I called you out for a reason, or rather, a request. Miriam said, cutting straight to the point. Though it's unlikely, I still wanted to try. Go ahead. Roy nodded. Would you be interested in joining the Holy Church? The higher-ups have said that your solo takedown of 3 troublesome dead apostle ancestors is enough to earn you the title of Saint within the church. If you're interested, you could come to the headquarters. The atmosphere grew heavy. Seeing Roy's strange, silent expression, Miriam sighed. I knew it. What a stupid question. Those guys. I already expected this answer, and those higher-ups are dreaming. A title like Saint in exchange for a magician's top-tier combat power? Fanatics really do have twisted minds. Miriam didn't hold back, subtly mocking his superiors. Then he shouted into a mirror he was holding. Are you satisfied now? I've said what needed to be said. This doesn't count as slacking off. If you want to recruit someone, at least have the decency to show up in person. Sending me as a messenger? What a joke. Miriam. A voice began to speak from the other side of the mirror, but with a crack, the mirror shattered, cutting off the communication. All right, Mr. Roy, I've done my annoying duty. I'll leave the rest of the time to you and the princess. I have other matters to attend to, so I won't disturb you further. Normally, Miriam wouldn't bother with such a ridiculous task. But this time was different. After the events, Arcuaid had personally sought him out and asked him several strange questions. Though Miriam himself had never experienced romance, having lived for over 1,000 years in the material world, he had seen it all. But this situation was new to him. From Arcuaid's behavior, it was clear that while she might not yet understand love, she had developed a deep attachment to Roy. Had the princess fallen for him? The realization startled Miriam. As a staunch supporter of the White Princess, he began to strategize. Arcuaid, having spent most of her time in the depths of the Millennium Castle, retained a pure innocence and lacked understanding of the complexities of the world. When it came to emotions, she only knew simple concepts like liking someone or considering someone a friend if they helped her. It was easy for her to be deceived. If it were anyone else trying to deceive the princess, Miriam would have strung them up and killed them without hesitation. But if the person in question was the new magician of the third magic who had single-handedly taken down 3 dead apostle ancestors in a week, well, that was a different story. It wasn't just about strength. They were comrades who had fought side by side. Betraying that bond after the battle was unthinkable. Miriam was a man of loyalty and honor. And he was certain that if he were to foolishly pick a fight, he'd only be adding to Roy's list of achievements. 3 dead apostle ancestors weren't enough? Did he really want to be the 4th? Moreover, Arcuaid wasn't being deceived. Roy had protected her for so long, aided her at her weakest, and finally resolved her centuries-long grudge with Roa. All these things combined had given Arcuaid, who had never relied on anyone before, a strange new feeling. Dependency. Emotionally, Arcuaid was serious. Though she didn't fully understand love, her attachment and affection were genuine. And Roy was no ordinary person. His strength was unparalleled. If Arcuaid stayed by his side, her safety wouldn't be a concern. Whether it was Altraj or Orton Ross, anyone who dared to target Arcuaid would have to go through Roy first. All things considered, Roy was a good match. If things progressed between them, it wouldn't be a bad outcome. The White Princess would gain not only Miriam's support but also Roy's, who was no less formidable than Altraj. Though proposing such a thing wasn't something Miriam found difficult, the main issue was that Arcuaid hadn't fully grasped her own feelings. A sudden proposal might backfire. So, as a loyal supporter of the White Princess, Miriam decided to play matchmaker and let them figure things out on their own. Using the Holy Church's request as an excuse, Miriam made his exit after a brief exchange, leaving the two alone. Before Roy arrived, Miriam had already explained to Arcuaid what her feelings might mean and how she should approach Roy. He even offered a few suggestions. Now, he had done all he could. The rest was up to Arcuaid. Whatever the outcome, Miriam could only wish her luck. Watching Miriam leave in a hurry, Roy was puzzled. Had Miriam called him out just to ask such a trivial question? He couldn't understand the thought process of these dead apostle ancestors. Though confused, he smiled at Arcuaid, who had run up to him. Arcuaid, you're here too? Yeah, I came with Miriam. Roy, let's go over there. I found something fun. Arcuaid happily took Roy's hand and led him back to the swing she had been on earlier. She sat down, and instead of joining her, Roy stood behind her and gently pushed the swing. Taking the opportunity, Roy asked, So, Arcuaid, is there something you wanted to talk to me about? Well, yes. What is it? Are you planning to return to the Millennium Castle? Roy looked down at her. Huh? How did you know? Did Miriam tell you? No, I guessed. Roy shook his head. Roa's soul has been stripped of his emotions and self, forever trapped in my reality marble. He won't reincarnate or cause trouble anymore. So, you don't need to chase him anymore. It's about time for you to return, isn't it? You're amazing, Roy. You really can guess everything. Arcuaid sighed. Though she smiled, there was a hint of sadness in her expression. Roa's been completely destroyed, and I don't need to wander around seeking revenge anymore. I've been away from the Millennium Castle for a long time, and it's about time I went back to sleep. Even though I've known this was coming, the thought of leaving you, Shiki, and Bio soon. Arcuaid's voice grew soft, tinged with sorrow. For her, these past 7 days had been more eventful than the last century. For the first time, she had made true friends, experienced the vibrant world, and tasted delicious food. But now. So, you don't want to leave us, do you, Arcuaid? Yeah, I want to keep being friends with everyone, to live with you and Shiki. Tears welled up in Arcuaid's eyes as she spoke earnestly. I see. Then why not stay? You don't have to go back. Huh? Arcuaid was stunned by his response. She looked up at Roy, who smiled gently, and stammered, But I. Are you worried about your bloodlust? Shiki's already helped suppress it, hasn't she? It might not be completely gone, but with regular sessions and some time, I'm sure Shiki can handle it. Seeing Arcuaid's flustered expression, Roy chuckled and teased her. Or are you homesick? I don't think so. I've been to the Millennium Castle before. Though the castle still stands, it's empty except for mindless dead apostles and puppets. It's just a lifeless place. Going back would be meaningless. So, what are you worried about, Arcuaid? If you want to stay, then stay. We're your friends, and you're welcome to live here as long as you like. Even if the dead apostle ancestors try to target you again, I'll protect you. So, don't overthink it. Just make your choice. Roy. Arcuaid was momentarily dazed. She reached out and took Roy's warm, broad hand. Then, with a slight tug, she stood up and hugged Roy tightly, burying her face in his chest. Her voice was soft but filled with joy as she whispered, Thank you, Roy. Meeting you this time was the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me. I know I'm not very smart, and sometimes I don't listen to you, causing you a lot of trouble. But even so, you and everyone else have always taken care of me. Whether it was reviving me from death, helping me defeat NRVNQSR and Vlov, or even killing Roa and finally ending this centuries-long grudge. You've really, truly helped me so much. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of overwhelming happiness. Crying over something like this? Arcuaid, you're as adorable as ever. Roy patted her shoulder as she clung to him, quietly sobbing. Actually, I came out this time because of you. Our meeting wasn't a coincidence. It was fate. Whether it was our encounter in that dream or me finding you, meeting you has been incredibly fortunate for me too. I believe there are no coincidences in this world, only inevitabilities. So, you don't dislike me, Roy? Hearing his response, Arcuaid was surprised but overjoyed. Of course not. No one could dislike Arcuaid. You're too cute, after all. Roy shook his head and extended his hand to her. This time, it was his turn to make the invitation. So, Arcuaid, would you like to stay? To live in this world with Shiki, Bio, and Tico? There's no need to lock yourself away in that cold castle. Come and see how much the world has changed. Really? Can I? Of course. You're always welcome here. Okay, I want to stay. Under the cool moonlight, Arcuaid took his hand. I want to live with everyone. I don't want to go back to that empty castle anymore. I like everyone so much. I want to fight alongside you, live with Shiki, and eat more delicious food with Bio. I really want to stay here. Feeling the warmth of his hand, Arcuaid's tears flowed freely. This time, they weren't tears of sorrow but of overwhelming joy. She had finally found a home, a place where she truly belonged. Then come. This will always be your home. Roy's voice was calm and gentle. Just like their first meeting, everything was warm and peaceful. Under the pale moonlight, they both made their choice. Chapter 158, 158 Farewell. The Misaki incident, which had swept through the entire city, had yielded significant results for Roy. 3 of the 27 dead apostle ancestors had been annihilated in Japan, sending shockwaves through the world of magecraft. Although Roa was still believed to be capable of reincarnating, the deaths of NRVNQSR Chaos and Vlav Archangel were undeniable. Maram Solomon and Seal of the Burial Agency had personally confirmed their demise. According to intelligence gathered by the Clock Tower in Europe, the self-proclaimed king of the dead apostles, the White Wing Lord, had engaged in a fierce battle with the Black and White Knights at his stronghold. Despite the rare joint effort of the Black and White Knights, the White Wing Lord, leveraging his formidable strength and home field advantage, managed to repel them, albeit at the cost of significant damage to his estate. To the discerning eye, this was a clear warning from the Black Princess, Altraj Brunistiot, to the White Wing Lord. Speculation suggested that the incident was related to the 3 dead apostle ancestors who had perished in Japan. Rumors also hinted at the involvement of the mysterious princess of the true ancestors, Arcuaid Brunistiot, from the Millennium Castle. As a result, while those in the know kept a close watch, most magi steered clear, fearing the repercussions of getting involved. Compared to the turmoil in Europe, the disturbances at the Tano residence went largely unnoticed. First, Akaya Tano had used her knowledge of Shiki Tano, Roa, to lure him into a confrontation. The two had indeed clashed violently upon meeting, but due to Roy's intervention and the White Wing Lord's meddling, Roa's control over Shiki Tano's body had accelerated significantly. He had also brought with him a contingent of elite dead apostles trained by the White Wing Lord. While part of Roa's motivation was influenced by Shiki's lingering memories, his primary goal was to eliminate the threat posed by the Tano family. With Seal, one of his previous reincarnations, and Maram Solomon, that old fox, present in the city, attacking the church would have been too risky and would have resulted in unnecessary losses. To prevent these hypocrites from aiding Roy and clearing out the dead apostles meant to stall him, Roa had brought a force of flame-wielding dead apostles to assault the Tano residence, aiming to swiftly eliminate its leaders. Primarily Akaya Tano. Under the onslaught of the flame-wielding dead apostles and the elite forces, the Tano family's strength and lives were rapidly depleted. In a short time, the Tano mansion was engulfed in flames, with countless members of the branch families and servants perishing, their bodies piled in the courtyard. With Roa's relentless attacks, Akaya could barely hold her ground. As the flame-wielding dead apostles continued their massacre, she began to lose her composure. The demon blood of the Tano family began to take hold, driving her toward madness as she fought fiercely against Roa. Seizing the opportunity, Kohaku, the Tano family's maid, joined the fray, intending to sacrifice herself to lure Akaya into taking a fatal blow from Roa. Her plan unfolded as expected. Even in her frenzied state, Akaya instinctively moved to protect Kohaku, stepping in to take the lethal strike meant for her maid. But just as everything seemed to be going according to plan. Splat! The sound of blood splattering filled the air, and warm liquid splashed onto the ground. Kohaku opened her eyes to see Akaya standing in front of her, shielding her from Roa's deadly attack. But why? It was Roa's arm that had been severed, Akaya who had stepped in to protect her, and standing in front of them both was Shiki Tano, his mystic eyes of death perception activated as he glared at Roa. Why had he returned so quickly? Hadn't Shiki been taken away by that man? According to the plan, Akaya was supposed to die, and Shiki would then seek revenge against Roa, ultimately killing him. What was happening now? Kohaku was utterly baffled. Shiki's timely appearance was thanks to a certain magician's intervention. Sensing the presence of the dead apostle army and Vlav Archangel's magical energy, Roy had quickly taken action. After regaining consciousness, Shiki confirmed that his classmate, Mayuzumi, was unharmed and breathed a sigh of relief. Of course, he also saw the city of Misaki engulfed in flames. Worried about his sister and Kohaku, Shiki pleaded with Roy to take him along. Roy, of course, agreed. Even if Shiki hadn't asked, Roy would have dropped him off near the Tano residence. Chaos often breeds opportunity, and while the city was in turmoil, something significant was clearly happening at the Tano residence. It was best to let Shiki handle it. Due to Kohaku and Shiki's involvement, Roy couldn't intervene directly. The Tano family's sins had to be resolved by themselves. As for Roy would deal with him, but first, Vlad Archangel, who was wreaking havoc in the city, took priority. Thus, Shiki arrived on the battlefield just in time. His timely appearance saved Akaya from Roa's fatal strike, altering the course of events. Akaya survived, and Kohaku's plan fell apart. Seeing Shiki, Roa, influenced by Shiki's memories, felt an intense hatred for the boy who had once killed him. Shiki, too, was shocked to see Roa, whom he had believed dead, now standing before him. But with the battle raging and Roa having fully descended into savagery, allying with monsters to kill Akaya and Kohaku was unforgivable. In a fit of rage, Shiki wielded an Anitsuyaru in his left hand and a silver dagger in his right, activating his mystic eyes of death perception to engage Roa in a prolonged battle amidst the flames. Ultimately, Roa, with more pressing plans, chose to disengage. Having already decimated much of the Tano family's forces, he left behind a group of dead apostles as a distraction for Shiki to deal with. The Tano family suffered devastating losses, with hundreds of members killed or injured. Akaya, severely wounded, fell into a coma, leaving the family in disarray. Shiki, as the eldest son, temporarily took charge. In a temporary residence of the Tano family, Shiki, now thrust into the role of family head, stared wearily at the endless pile of documents and responsibilities before him. He finally understood the pressure Akaya had been under, trying to hold the family together. Tap tap tap, the sound of footsteps drew Shiki's attention, and he looked up toward the door. "Who is it?" "It's me, Shiki-sama." Kohaku, still dressed in her maid uniform, entered the room. Seeing her, Shiki nodded. "Kohaku. What is it?" "It's late. Shouldn't you be resting?" Kohaku bit her lip, unsure how to begin. After a moment of hesitation, she resolved to confess everything to Shiki. "Shiki-sama, actually, I..." But before she could continue, Shiki looked up, his clear eyes meeting hers. Those eyes, not the ones he used in battle, were gentle and understanding. Shiki already knew what Kohaku wanted to say. He had pieced it all together after Roy restored his memories and after finding his father's, or rather, his enemies' notes in the study during his brief tenure as family head. He knew what Kohaku had intended to do, and Roy's hints had only confirmed his suspicions. But some things were better left unsaid. So Shiki didn't press her. He didn't let Kohaku reveal the truth. Meeting Shiki's gaze, Kohaku fell silent, eventually bowing her head and whispering, "Good night, Shiki-sama." "Get some rest, Kohaku." Shiki smiled softly, then returned to the mountain of paperwork before him. Only after Kohaku had left did he look up again, gazing out the window. The night was dark, the pale moon hanging in the sky. As he stared at the moon, Shiki sighed, lost in thought. He wasn't sure if what he was doing was right. Father. Akaya. While Shiki wrestled with his choices, dozens of kilometers away, a tall, elderly man in a thick, Western-style black cloak was browsing his favorite magical girl figurine shop. Amidst the younger crowd, the old man stood out like a sore thumb. But the judgment of ordinary people couldn't deter the heart of a true gentleman like Zelrech. He was too busy admiring the craftsmanship of the figurines, searching for new inspiration. Roy, standing beside him, was less than amused. The old man had contacted him using a dimensional slip of paper, summoning him to a location in Misaki City. Upon arriving, Roy found himself in a store catering to certain tastes. He was tempted to leave immediately, but Zelrech had already grabbed him by the neck and dragged him inside. "Oh, look at this craftsmanship, these perfect curves. Simply adorable. But if I were to critique, there's room for improvement. For example, the skirt is too long. A mini skirt paired with thigh-high socks would be more fitting. This one, and that one. Hold these for me, boy." In the adult-oriented magical girl figurine shop, Zelrech handed Roy an endless stream of figurines, enthusiastically explaining the appeal of each magical girl. From their chests to their hips, even discussing the designs of their undergarments, Zelrech's detailed commentary drew admiring glances from the other patrons. This old man was a true connoisseur. Roy, however, was struggling to suppress the urge to slap the old man and walk out. "Enough of this nonsense, Zelrech. If you have something to say, just say it. I'm not interested in magical girls." "Oh? After seeing these treasures and hearing my explanations, you're still unmoved?" Zelrech was genuinely surprised. He had hoped to recruit Roy into the Magical Girl Appreciation Club. Not in the slightest. Roy shook his head firmly. "Humphrey, all that effort wasted on a brick wall. Fine, let's get to the point." With a sigh, Zelrech grabbed Roy's hand and led him to a corner of the shop. With a thought, they were transported away from the store and into Zelrech's dimensional rift. "All right, it's safer to discuss the rest here." Back in his domain, Zalrach carefully unpacked the magical girl figurines Roy had been holding and placed them in a display case on the wall. Roy had long since given up on questioning Zalrach's lack of decorum. The old man's sense of shame had clearly been lost to the ages. Zalrach's nature wasn't hard to figure out. He was a whimsical old gentleman, which explained why he got along so well with someone like Merlin. Thanks to the nature of the second magic, he had witnessed countless disasters and fascinating events across parallel worlds. Human rules and conventions held no sway over him. Even his legendary battle with the Crimson Moon had been motivated by sheer annoyance. Seeing how efficiently Roy had handled the situation in just a week had impressed him. He was even more surprised by how Roy had managed to win over Arcuaid. First Narut, and now the princess of the true ancestors. The boy had a knack for it. In the many parallel worlds Zalrach had observed, Arcuaid's fate often ended in death or rampage, depending on the choices made by a certain boy named Shikitano. But with Roy's involvement, many of those possibilities had been consolidated into a single, favorable outcome. It was as if Roy had steered events toward a happier future. Upon his return, Zalrach had checked on Arcuaid. Her bloodlust had been largely suppressed, and there were no signs of the Crimson Moon's revival within her. This had saved him a great deal of trouble. But more importantly, he had made a startling discovery. Arcuaid was a perfect match for his newly completed Magical Girl Transcendence System 3. It was a match made in heaven. Though Arcuaid's true age might not fit the typical magical girl mold, Zalrach was no stickler for such trivialities. He could see her potential at a glance. Having spent centuries in the Millennium Castle, Arcuaid retained a childlike innocence, making her the ideal candidate for his magical girl system. He was determined to recruit her, no matter what. Seeing the gleeful expression on Zalrach's face, Roy's eye twitched. Whatever the old man was plotting, it couldn't be good. Enough of your wild ideas. Let's talk business, Zalrach. Chapter 159, 159 The World's Destroyer in Zalrach's parallel world residence. There aren't many important matters to discuss, but it's mainly about Merlin's situation. Zalrach said, casually closing an ancient book on the table before beginning to chat with Roy. Still, you've done an exceptional job with this commission. Ignoring the child of Inash that Ortenross tossed over here, you've taken Altenar VNQSR Chaos, Vlav Archangel, and Roa in one go. You've dealt a significant blow to the dead Apostle Ancestors' forces, causing quite a stir in the world. Even in centuries of conflict with the Holy Church, they've never lost so many dead Apostle Ancestors at once. Thinking about a Holy Church, whose morale had soared after the confirmed deaths of 2 dead Apostle Ancestors, and the shaken dead Apostle Ancestors, Zalrach couldn't help but laugh. Now, within the dead Apostle ranks, the Black Princess is punishing the White Wing Lord, and the Black and White Knights are locked in a deadly battle with him. Meanwhile, the Holy Church has mobilized its top forces to reclaim the territories of the dead Apostle Ancestors as quickly as possible. The dead Apostle Ancestors are facing threats both internally and externally. Thankfully, Altraj didn't cause any trouble in front of Roy during the chaos. The expanding reality marble in the Child of Inash wasn't targeting her. They were just standing in that area and were detected by Roy. If they had shown any hostility, escaping that reality marble wouldn't have been so easy. Otherwise, even if she had escaped, the Black and White Knights might not have been so lucky. Compared to the naive Arcuaid, Altraj is clearly much sharper. Still, Zalrach preferred Arcuaid, who had the potential to become a magical girl. After some thought, Zalrach said idly, well, since you're not interested in magical girls, let's cut to the chase. I have other matters to attend to later. Roy was speechless. Wasn't it you who dragged me into that adult store earlier? Actually, I've been observing you since you entered this world. The repeated Holy Grail wars were my opportunity to understand you better. Ignoring Roy's comment, Zalrach continued. Later, because that uncontrolled cycle might bring some undesirable consequences, I made an exception and intervened once. Roy remained silent, letting Zalrach continue. Zalrach sighed. Then I regretted it. After freeing you from that cycle, I realized what kind of existence I had unleashed. Though you're different from the Elder Gods, your actions are no less destructive than theirs. What are you trying to say? Roy frowned. By now, he could tell that Zalrach's words carried deeper implications. Well, to put it simply, you've been destroying worlds all along. Zalrach raised his hand, a cold smile on his lips. Destroying worlds? What do you mean? Roy's expression shifted slightly. He knew Zalrach, despite his playful demeanor, wasn't one to speak carelessly. So, what was going on? Calm down, kid. When I say destroying worlds, I don't mean physical destruction. I mean the destruction of concepts and possibilities. To be frank, after observing you for so long, I've gained some understanding of your personality and methods. The events you've resolved have indeed led to the best possible outcomes. Artoria, Sakura, and Arcuaid. Their fates weren't originally set in stone. Each had at least 2 or more possibilities, or if lines, in parallel worlds. Zelrach held up 3 fingers as he explained. But due to your interference, the fates of these characters have changed. Those who were supposed to die or meet tragic ends have found new outcomes. This, in itself, isn't a big deal to me. Divergences between worlds are common. However, what I didn't expect was that your interference has caused the fates of characters in other timelines to change as well. Whether subjective or objective, all fates are converging toward your timeline. Their destinies have been completely altered and fixed. The possibilities and uncertainties have vanished. This is the most significant change I've observed. Zelrach then began to illustrate specific examples of these changes. Originally, for the birth of Lord Elmeloy II, Kenneth Archibald, that lemon-headed man, was destined to die in the Fourth Holy Grail War. But because of Roy's interference, other timelines began to align with this world, allowing many versions of Kenneth to escape their fated deaths. For instance, before the Holy Grail War, Kenneth caught Waver Velvet stealing his relic, which infuriated him so much that he abandoned the rural ritual and began training Waver at the clock tower. Or, in another parallel world, his fiancée Sola Ui fell in love with him earlier and dragged him on a honeymoon, causing him to miss the Holy Grail War entirely. Then there's Sakura Tasaka. In some timelines, Tsukumitsu's insect magecraft would go out of control, leading to his premature death, which would be discovered by Tokiomi Tasaka during a visit. Or, in another timeline, Karayomitsu would make a bold move, attempting to take Tsukin down with him in a fiery explosion, drawing the church's attention and saving Sakura. Countless improbable events are now unfolding in parallel worlds. This is what surprised Zelrach the most. As Zelrach continued to describe the changes he had observed in parallel worlds, Roy began to understand. What Zelrach meant was that all the branching paths of a single storyline were converging, leaving only the timeline anchored in Roy's world. Though I must admit, the timeline you've chosen is the most perfect one I've observed across parallel worlds. If it were anyone else, they'd be thrilled to see everything heading toward a happy ending. But Zelrach's expression turned serious. Take a look at this first. With a wave of his hand, Zelrach used his magic to draw a massive, intricate tree diagram in the air. The branches of this tree had various starting points and extended toward unknown ends, representing the infinite possibilities of parallel worlds. But when Zelrach introduced a bright red dot into the diagram, the tree structure immediately underwent a noticeable change. This is Chapter 160. 160 World Line. The image projected midair by Zelrach was an intricate and peculiar diagram. It depicted countless starting points, branching out into innumerable lines, each representing a different path. Yet, after several key junctures, these complex branches all converged toward a single, definitive endpoint. This convergence transformed what was once a sprawling, tree-like diagram into a single, unbroken red line. This red line symbolized the future that Roy had created. Or rather, the future he had chosen. The one that had become an immutable reality. At first, Zelrach found this anomaly hard to believe. He thought it might be the result of some unforeseen alteration. However, after repeated observations across multiple parallel worlds, he discovered that all worlds were gradually aligning with Roy's chosen path. In other words, this young man was actively selecting the future he desired. The conclusion was absurd, almost incomprehensible. Yet, there was no more plausible explanation. Initially, Zelrach had thought that Roy, unlike those incomprehensible outer gods, and with the backing of the root and the permissions granted by the counterforce, wouldn't cause any major disruptions. Now, he realized how naive that assumption had been. He also understood why the counterforce had been so vehemently opposed to Roy from the very beginning. This young man was anything but predictable. Though his intentions weren't inherently malicious, his unique nature had now fully manifested. It was a nature capable of interfering with parallel worlds. Though the mechanics of it were unclear, it functioned like an anchor point, forcibly pulling all parallel worlds toward a singular trajectory. He was dismantling all possible outcomes, whether tragic or comedic, erasing the what-ifs and consolidating every world line into the one future he had chosen. In essence, this was a form of world destruction. Do you understand now, boy? This is the conclusion I've reached after my recent journey. Zelrach said, dispersing the diagram with a wave of his hand and exhaling in frustration. At first, I couldn't comprehend what had caused such a drastic shift in the parallel worlds. But after investigating, I realized it was all your doing. Zelrach was clearly displeased that Roy had kept him busy for so long. So that's why you said I'm destroying the possibilities of the world. Roy finally grasped the old man's meaning. Exactly. It's good that you understand. Right now, you're like an anchor point. The outcome you lock onto will influence all parallel worlds. That's why it's dangerous to let you roam freely. If I were to offer advice, I'd suggest you take Arcuaid, Shiki, and settle down in the Millennium Castle or Avalon. Live a peaceful life there. Stop meddling in worldly affairs and interfering with the future. Be an observer and let the world unfold naturally. As long as you don't go around tampering with world lines, that's all the counterforce is asking of you. Zelrach stroked his chin, offering what he considered a reasonable suggestion. Is that so? I thought you'd lock me up here to ensure the stability of the world. Roy replied with a hint of sarcasm. Ha ha ha. That's not a bad idea. Locking you up here would indeed be the simplest solution. Zelrach laughed, not denying the feasibility of Roy's suggestion. In fact, the counterforce did ask me to do just that. To confine you within the world drift and restrict your movements. But never mind. I'm not their lackey. I have no obligation to do their bidding, nor do they have the authority to command me. Do as you please. After all, I'm merely an observer of parallel worlds, not their guardian. I returned only to explain the nature of the anchor point within you, so that you might act more cautiously in the future and make truly rational choices. Otherwise, things could get very messy. While the counterforce was in a panic over Roy's world-destroying potential, Zelrach remained indifferent. Compared to the counterforce's requests, he was more interested in the progress of the magical girl transformation system. With a wave of his hand, he opened a portal and presented it to Roy. Merlin seems to be in quite a bit of trouble. He contacted me, hoping I'd use the second magic to send you over to assist him. Step through this portal, and you'll arrive in Merlin's time. Merlin's in trouble? Roy was surprised. Merlin was no weakling. His mastery of the swordsmanship was unparalleled. Even Artoria had admitted that Merlin surpassed her in terms of pure swordsmanship. Moreover, with his clairvoyance and his knack for knowing when to retreat, what kind of danger could he possibly be in? Seeing Roy's puzzled expression, Zelrach shook his head and explained, I know what you're thinking. Merlin's skills are indeed sufficient to handle most challenges. But this time, the situation is different. The enemy he's facing in the Age of Gods in Mesopotamia isn't someone like Miramor dead apostle ancestors. This might even involve a god. The Age of Gods in Mesopotamia. Hearing this, Roy was momentarily stunned but quickly realized the gravity of the situation. That was the era of Gilgamesh and the Seventh Singularity. Merlin was strong, but if he was up against that being, he stood no chance. So, he is calling for reinforcements, is he? How about it? Should I send you over to help him? He's currently suffering under Gilgamesh's command. So it's Merlin, Gilgamesh, and Chaldea face the primordial mother goddess Tiamat. I promised Merlin that I'd stand by him when he needed help. Roy nodded, answering Zelrach's question. Oh? You and Merlin have grown that close, have you? Zelrach was somewhat surprised by Roy's resolute response. Yes, we're friends. Without hesitation, Roy affirmed his commitment. He always kept his promises. Friends, huh? Hey, that fool Merlin has made quite a good friend. Zelrach chuckled, then adjusted the portal to hover in front of Roy. Then prepare to depart, boy. Wait a moment, old man. Roy shook his head and made a request before stepping through. Can you delay the transfer for a bit? I need to say goodbye to Shiki and Arcuaid. If I suddenly disappear, it'll cause a lot of trouble. A farewell, huh? That's not a problem. I mentioned earlier that I'd reward you after you complete this task. This should help with that. With that, Zelrach pulled out a peculiar silver bracelet from his pocket. This is a mystic code of parallel world shifting, crafted using the second magic. The blue gemstone embedded in it contains the second magic I infused into it. Each use will deplete some of its magical energy, but you don't need to worry about running out. As long as you supply it with enough power, the magic within will regenerate. It should restore its functionality every half-month or so. After explaining, he fastened the bracelet onto Roy's wrist. The strange magical energy emanating from it felt novel to Roy. The second magic. It was a power entirely different from the third magic. He could sense that with just a slight activation of the bracelet, he'd be able to traverse parallel worlds freely. Such a mysterious power. Alright, the user manual is stored within the bracelet. You can figure it out on your own. I have other matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave now, boy. Once he confirmed that Roy understood how to use the bracelet, Zelrach didn't linger. With a wave of his hand, he sent Roy out of the dimensional rift. The low hum of machinery filled the air. Looking around at the reconstruction efforts in the aftermath of the disaster in Misaki City, Roy sighed, his thoughts turning to the peculiar anchor point within him that Zelrach had spoken of. It was a revelation that left him uneasy. So far, the outcomes he had chosen had been relatively positive. Being an anchor point wasn't entirely a bad thing. But what if, one day, a mistake on his part led to a disastrous outcome? Would all parallel worlds suffer as a result? The weight of this possibility pressed heavily on his shoulders, an invisible burden that grew with each passing thought. Taking a deep breath, Roy glanced at the people around him, busy rebuilding their lives, and decided to head toward a quieter area to clear his mind. "Roy, come here, quick." Just as he had walked a short distance, a familiar voice called out to him. It was Arcuaid. Roy turned toward the sound, and as he did, a melody, one etched deep into his very being, began to play. Moon Prism Power Makeup. Chapter 161, 161 Forgive Me. Accompanied by a BGM etched deep into his blood, Arcuaid transformed right before Roy's eyes. Yes, a genuine transformation. A white, flowing light emanated from a gemstone, enveloping her. Under the moonlight, Arcuaid leaped gracefully, mimicking the transformation sequences she had seen in anime, and landed smoothly. Now a magical girl, thanks to Ruby, Arcuaid landed on the ground, raised her left hand to flash a peace sign at Roy, and then pointed her magical wand at him. She chanted the iconic phrase, "In the name of the moon, I'll punish you." The scene fell into complete silence. Roy stared at Arcuaid, now clad in a white magical girl outfit, holding a wand. He opened his mouth but found himself at a loss for words. Was she beautiful? Absolutely. Was she happy? Arcuaid seemed quite pleased with herself. Representing the moon? Well, she was the princess of the moon, so she certainly had the right. But still, how should he respond? After a moment of contemplation, he decided to say nothing. This kind of spectacle could only be the work of one person. Zelrach, obsessed with magical girls. No one else in the entire moonlit world would go to such lengths, nor would anyone bother to create something as whimsical as a magical girl transformation device. However, as Roy glanced at the red gem hanging from Arcuaid's chest, it struck him as familiar. Zelrach, in his efforts to recruit Roy, had once explained the magical girl transformation system he was developing. There were two gems. Ruby and Sapphire. The one Arcuaid was wearing was clearly Ruby. But as far as Roy remembered, in the timeline of fate, Kaleid Liner Prisma Ilia, this Ruby was supposed to be Ilia's transformation device. How had it ended up with Arcuaid? Though, judging by the way Arcuaid was beaming, she was clearly delighted with her new toy. How do I look, Roy? Does this outfit suit me? And this wand? It doesn't require much magic. Just point it at something, and whoosh. It shoots out an aurora. Arcuaid moved closer, pulling Roy's hand as she demonstrated her new toy. Shiki said this outfit looks good on me too, but I feel a bit strange. The skirt feels too short. It wasn't that she felt embarrassed. Arcuaid simply wasn't used to wearing such short skirts. But since Shiki had complimented her and the new toy was so much fun, she couldn't help but eagerly show it off to Roy. Ruby on her chest suddenly spoke up, "Ha ha ha. Don't say that, Miss Arcuaid. This magical girl outfit suits you perfectly. If the old man chose you, it means you have the potential to be a true magical girl. In my opinion, there's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, you look absolutely adorable. For magical girls, cuteness is justice." Hearing this, Arcuaid's eyes sparkled, and she turned to Roy with an expectant gaze. "Really, Roy? Do I look cute in this outfit?" Roy hesitated for a moment, but under Arcuaid's hopeful stare, he nodded against his better judgment. "Yes, very cute. It suits you well. See, Arcuaid? Even this guy agrees. So what are you waiting for? Make a contract with me and become a magical girl." Hee, that's great. If Roy likes it, I'll wear this outfit all the time," Arcuaid declared happily. All the time? Roy's heart sank. Knowing Arcuaid, she might actually wear this outfit in public without a second thought. While she might lack a sense of shame, Roy certainly didn't. The thought of walking alongside a magical girl-clad Arcuaid, enduring the stares of passers-by, was enough to make him cringe. "Wait, Arcuaid. While I do think the outfit is cute, it might not be the most suitable for you." Roy quickly backtracked, his tone shifting. "Huh? But you just said." "I said it suits you, but not perfectly. After all, you're so cute that anything would look good on you." "Really?" Arcuaid seemed surprised but pleased by the compliment. "Of course. If you want new clothes, I can take you shopping. We can pick out something even better." Bombarded with such sweet words, Arcuaid couldn't resist. The idea of shopping with Roy instantly overshadowed her new toy. "Yay! Let's go shopping. And let's bring Shiki too," she exclaimed joyfully. "Miss Arcuaid, wait. Don't listen to him. He's just too embarrassed to admit he likes magical." Before Ruby could finish, Roy's hand shot out, grabbing the gem from Arcuaid's chest and silencing it mid-sentence. "You talk too much, Ruby. Ah. Let go, let go. It hurts. You're going to crush me." I won't say another word, I promise. After giving Ruby a brief lesson in manners, Roy released it. But he wasn't done yet. As the gem tried to fly away, he swiftly conjured a blue energy cage, trapping it inside. Ruby could only weakly call out to Arcuaid for help. "Save me, Miss Arcuaid." But Arcuaid didn't seem particularly concerned. To her, Ruby was just a toy or a piece of clothing. If it was gone, so be it. She was far more interested in the shopping trip Roy had mentioned. "Roy, when are we going shopping? I want to buy lots of new clothes," she asked excitedly. "After I get back. I have to leave tomorrow for a bit. I came back specifically to say goodbye to you and Shiki." "Huh? You're leaving?" "Yes, a friend of mine is in trouble. I need to go help him. Can I come with you? I'm fully recovered now. I can help." Arcuaid's enthusiasm dimmed slightly at the news, but she quickly suggested tagging along. "Sorry, but I can't take anyone with me this time. The place I'm going is special. I can only bring myself." Having just read the instructions for the bracelet given to him by Zalrech, Roy realized it only allowed for one person to travel. Bringing Arcuaid along would have been helpful. Her marble phantasm combined with Gilgamesh's noble phantasm would have been a sight to behold. But it wasn't possible. "I see." Arcuaid's mood visibly dropped. "But don't worry. With your abilities, I'm sure you'll solve the problem quickly. Shiki and I will wait for you here." "Thank you, Arcuaid." "No need to thank me. I'm the one who should be apologizing." Arcuaid shook her head, her understanding nature shining through. "Let's go find Shiki and tell her you're leaving. If you sneak off without telling her, she'll be furious." "All right, I'll go." "No need. I'm already here." Before Roy could finish, a familiar voice interrupted him. Turning around, he saw Shiki approaching from a distance. Dressed in her signature kimono, she held something strange in her hand. "Shiki, you're here." Arcuaid smiled and immediately rushed over to hug her. "Arcuaid, don't hug me like that. It's embarrassing." Shiki tried to dodge, but Arcuaid was too quick. She struggled to break free, but the blonde's strength was overwhelming. She could only endure the affectionate embrace. "You two seem close," Roy remarked with a smile. "Yeah, I really like Shiki. She helped me overcome my 800-year-old bloodlust, and she has such a comforting presence." Arcuaid spoke without hesitation. "This is too much." Shiki, still trapped in Arcuaid's embrace, felt increasingly uncomfortable. The blue object she had been holding slipped from her hand unnoticed. "What's this?" "Sapphire." Seeing the floating gem, Ruby in the cage cried out excitedly. "Sister! Why are you in a cage?" Sapphire sounded shocked. She had been knocked out by Shiki earlier and had just woken up, only to find her sister imprisoned. "Are you two sisters?" Roy asked the floating sapphire. He was genuinely curious about these two magical girl systems created by Zalrech. To think he could create such highly intelligent magical tools. "Yes, please release my sister. Though she can be a pervert and sometimes plays cruel pranks, she means no harm. Please let her go." "Ah." Before she could finish, Roy grabbed her and tossed her into the cage alongside Ruby. If they were sisters, they should stay together. Family should stick together, after all. While Shiki and Arcuaid were busy, Roy took the opportunity to interrogate the two gems about their origins. He already knew about Ruby, but Sapphire's story was more complicated. Earlier, Arcuaid and Shiki had been out shopping when they encountered a tall, strange old man at a street stall. The man wore a black Western-style robe and exuded an aura of danger. Shiki, sensing the threat, immediately activated her mystic eyes of death perception. But Arcuaid, familiar with dead apostle energy, didn't react as strongly. She felt no hostility from the old man. In fact, he seemed oddly familiar. The old man didn't say much. After observing the two for a moment, he handed them each a box. "Would you like to become magical girls and fight for justice?" he asked cryptically before vanishing, leaving the two women bewildered. Inside the boxes were Ruby and Sapphire. Ruby chose Arcuaid, who happily accepted and transformed into a magical girl. Sapphire, however, made the mistake of choosing Shiki, attempting to recruit her as a magical girl as well. The result? After relentless pestering, Shiki knocked Sapphire out and decided to hand it over to Arcuaid as a plaything. Hearing the story, Roy's expression shifted slightly. Turning Shiki into a magical girl? That old man really had some nerve. And Sapphire was lucky Shiki hadn't sliced it into pieces. Magical girls? What a disaster. Well, he might as well mail these two back to the clock tower as gifts for Rains and Gray. Though he wasn't sure how they'd react. Rains probably wouldn't mind, but Gray would definitely be embarrassed. No matter. Even if they didn't want the gems, they could always fly back to the old man's office in the clock tower. After some thought, Roy decided on a plan for the two gems. Meanwhile, Shiki and Arcuaid, having finished their little scuffle, walked over to him. Arcuaid told me you're leaving again? Shiki asked. Yes, it's about that friend I mentioned earlier. Merlin. He's in trouble, and I need to go help him. That court mage of King Arthur's? The very same. And the place I need to go is special. It's not in this time or even this world. I can only get there using a tool given to me by a certain old man. Roy showed Shiki the bracelet on his wrist. But this tool can only take one person, so... I'm sorry, Shiki. He said apologetically. Idiot. There's no need to apologize. If your friend needs help, it's only right that you go. I won't stop you or hold you back. That would only slow you down. Shiki shook her head. Though she felt a pang of sadness at Roy's departure,